Good morning.
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
How are you, Kim?
I am tired. How are you?
Tired
I am burned out.
and burned out.
Man, yes,
It's a tough time.
it is.
Dr. Lamb.
Hey, good morning, Tim.
Good morning. Good morning. Is it possible for us to present like in the beginning? We at least for my group, we have we have a few members with family stuff, and I know that Candace is dealing with some personal stuff right now too.
That'd be fine. That would be fine. I want to do 5 minutes to start with, catch us up to where we are. But after that, I'll let y'all get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I want to do close some of this stuff. I want to talk about what's upcoming here. So let me pull up. Yeah, that's what I want. All right. I'll stop my share again. See who we got. You need a bigger mug, Melody. You're like me, monster. Takes longer to get going in the morning than it used to.
That's what you need the day after Halloween in a school.
Yeah.
They were already wild yesterday.
Oh, I'm sure they've already started the candy. We got to get our candy bags put together. We're gonna set them out front where they can just come by and pick them up. We try to keep folks out of the house. I don't want to have to come to the door. Too many breakthrough cases right now. Different types. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. We're getting close. Good morning, David. Good morning, Alexandra.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right.
Blair, were things wild at your school yesterday?
Of course.
And it'll be the same way. Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying we just recently had Spirit Week, so I think that kind of got out of their system of asking if they could wear their costumes and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Oh Lord. I'm expecting, well, I don't know if it'd be as many as Saturday night, but I'm expecting about 1 million kids this week, this Sunday night. They're all ready and raring to go. Everybody's decorations are over the top. Yeah, we're going to do a presentation as soon as I do catch up here. Good morning, Marla. All right, so we're missing a couple, but we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everybody's doing well. I know it's a tough time. I'm gonna go ahead and catch us up to where we are. Let me share my screen. All right, so this is Saturday, October 30th. We're gonna do Miriam today in your presentation on your last case study. Next week, we will do Royce and talk about the outside reading books. And then on Saturday, December 4th, I have a scheduled for all 10 of your presentations. We have 5 sessions and they run our usual hour and 15 minutes. So that means you've got roughly 30 minutes to do your presentation and then questions, and we should be able to knock out all of them. Now, we may have some guests join us that day to see these, because these are kind of your defense proposals. And so I don't know if we'll have anybody, or sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. And so don't be nervous if we do. You still do your thing. Make sure that you're ready and prepared. To that end, I'll go ahead and close that. I have a PowerPoint presentation. This is a Word document that tells you what to have in your PowerPoint presentation. I'll go over that in 1 second. And here are two documents to review before you start putting your presentation together. They're the top 10 things to remember about each. There's 10 each about quantitative and qualitative. Let's see. Here are the things to remember about quantitative research. Don't make these errors. Here are the qualitative things to remember. Don't make those errors. And then I've got the top 10 ways to cheat using data. Please don't do any of those things. This should guide you about what to do, and this should be, don't do these things. So remember these before you start putting together your final presentation. They're kind of a review of the common errors that people make when they're entering into a research project. So don't make them. All right, and then what should your actual PowerPoints look like? Let's see, right here. Now, your limit is 20 slides. That's not 21 or 31, it's 20. That is your limit. Try to limit the amount of small graphics or words on your slides, big pictures, big picture ideas. First couple of slides, introduction. What's the problem I'm seeking to address and why is it important? That's about 2 slides. What are my research questions, my hypothesis, and/or research questions? We generally have, you don't have to start with your hypothesis, just what are my research as a result of my hypothesis? Here are my research questions. Then your lit review with your theoretical framework. Choose 1 or 2 of these. My literature review specifically about the problem that I'm seeking to address, and then some of the potential solutions from the literature. And so you say, well, Deol, what does that look like? Well, it looks like I'll use a school analogy. All right, so our problem is reading fluency. So that's what we would do our lit review on reading fluency. And then from that, we would say, oh, the common solution to that problem is phonics. And then we'd review literature or studies that use phonics to address the problem. Something just that simple. This is not hard. What is our theoretical framework? What is the problem we're seeking? The lit review on people who've had similar problems or that problem, and then lit review on some potential solutions. This doesn't need to be very long. Actually, if you wrote it out, when you write this out, it's only a couple pages. And you don't have to do an annotated bibliography. It's not bad to do that, but you don't have to do it. And then your methodology. Remember, we're doing mixed methodology. There are 3 types: convergent, explanatory, exploratory. We don't do exploratory because we're doing action research. Remember that. That's one of those things you got to remember. We only do either convergent or explanatory because we're doing action research. Convergence, when we collect quantitative and qualitative separately and compare the results, just like the case study we had where we had the second case study where we had the data was wrong, the quantitative, because they had used a middle category. Don't do dumb things like that. If you're looking at satisfaction, remember, it's not on a continuum. Hertzberg says that it's either you're satisfied or you're dissatisfied, and the things that contribute to those are different. The things that make you happy are not the same things that make you sad. The same things that make you stay are not the ones that make you go. Satisfaction is not on a continuum. It's one or the other. That's why you need to remember that we start with a theoretical framework because it guides us not to make critical errors like that in our data collection. But convergent, we collect one, then the other, we compare the two. Explanatory, we get qualitative first so we know what questions to ask on our quantitative. Just that simple. Most of the time we use convergent design, but sometimes we do explanatory. We do not do exploratory because we're not doing theoretical work, we're doing action research. And then your qualitative data project, how do you expect to collect your qualitative and quantitative data? What findings, recommendations you'll make, and then the action plan, project deliverables that you expect to deliver to the organization. That's how this goes. Do not deviate from the plan. This is just like the Army. Find the manual, read the manual, follow the manual. This is the process that we have for a proposal defense. You are proposing to do this research. This is how the defense goes. Whether you're doing a dissertation in practice, or a consultancy, which is a capstone at the doctoral level, this is the process. Don't try to create a new process. That will not go well. Follow the manual. All right. Questions you have for me? Let me check the chat here. I was thinking my project you advised exploratory. It might be, but you need to look at that a little bit. It's more of explanatory, David, than it is exploratory. And we'll look at that a little bit later today, and we'll look at the difference between the three of those. That's one of the documents. Now, since y'all are going to go first, please remember that I have given you my lesson plans. I have outlined the Merriam chapters. Now, whether you did or not, you were supposed to have already done Merriam before you got to me. And so that's why I don't spend nearly as much time on it. Merriam was introduced early in 730 and 732. And so I have outlined those chapters for you. So those lesson plans that I have from last week and last time and this time, those 9 chapters of Merriam, I have outlined what is important. They're only a couple pages long, but I have gone in and taken notes for you. This is what you should have got when you read Merriam. And that's what I'm going to go over today. We don't spend nearly as much time on qualitative, not because it's not important, but because we can't do all of it in one course block. And that's why Merriam book was introduced much earlier in the process. I just go over and highlight what you should have gotten from it. All right, questions before
Dr.
we
Lamb.
start? Yes.
I have a question. So should we already have qualitative and quantitative data before the project, or
No.
can we be in the process?
No, you can't. You shouldn't be in the process either.
Okay, not even in the process. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. Don't tell me that. If you've done it, no, just don't. That's your
No,
secret.
I have it, but I was just okay. I'll talk to you individually.
That's your
Okay.
secret. The way that all dissertation and practice capstone, the way they work is your methodology class is about middle of your doctoral studies. And at that point, you have to defend the notion of what you're going to go collect. You're not supposed to collect it any prior to that time. I have to put my stamp of approval, and if Dr. Hamilton comes in, or Dr. Putnam, or Dean Bull, or any of those people come in, theoretically, we're supposed to be able to say yes or no on your project before you start collecting data. And so we will turn you loose after this class. You are free to start your data collection, but not until you have completed this class.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
I haven't collected any yet.
Good. And so that's the process. All right. That's a great question though, Marla. Remember, the proposal is written in future tense, what you're going to do. When you do your final project, it's in, at your final presentation, at the end of your last class, it's written in, I did this. But right now, it's all future tense. This is what I propose to go and do. We have one more class, that is correct. We have one more class where we will cover Royce, which kind of puts it all together in program evaluation. And we'll talk about our outside reading books. And so, yes, we have one more class. And so my job today is to get us through Miriam. But again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Miriam because number one, you were supposed to have already read it. Number two, I've outlined the chapters for you. And I'll just highlight those today. I've already got them ready and got little highlights in them, but I'll highlight those for you today. All right, so we're starting with our case studies today. Oh, David's got a question.
Dr. Jones, just a quick question, and I guess a point of clarification. In the project phase 1, we completed, and we're supposed to have phase 2 completed by this semester, or at least by December. Dr. Jones sent us an email December 4th, and I was under the impression that phase 2 was the project. Is that in line with what you're talking about? I mean, we're supposed to have phase 2 completed by December 4th.
Well, if we looked at that, and let's do that right quick, share the screen. It'll take me a second to pull that up. All right, so here are the phases. Phase 1 was the project, was the problem that I need to solve. What do I need to do? What are my options? All right, so phase 2 planning. Let's look at that. Your literature review, your work document, your SMART goals, gateway assessment, all the deliverables here, planning phase, creating your status report. I mean, once you have, David, once you have done your proposal, your final project in this class, you have everything you need. It takes you about an hour to go in and do these things. About an hour. But now you can't do it again. She's exactly right. When you get your presentation ready for December 4th for us, you will have everything you need for this. And it seriously won't take much time. Your literature review, you'll have already done it. You got your SMART goals, your scope, all these things, your schedule of what you're going to do. That's in your qualitative and quantitative methodology right here. You should have, when you partnered last semester, you should have done your SMART goals and your risk. If you hadn't, it doesn't take, but to do a SWOT analysis, y'all have already done your SWOT. Gateway assessment, deliverables are right there. Status report, basically your presentation, this is what it is. You can just drop it in rather than using that template if you want to. So seriously, once you have your presentation for this, they mesh, then it takes about an hour to fill this out. Everybody got that? Questions about that? Is that what you were asking, David?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think that, I'll discuss in more details with you offline. But I think that covers it.
And you'll have everything you need. Don't spend an awful lot of time on the consultancy shell. I mean, that's what I mean, about an hour. Don't spend a lot of time on that. That's just to make sure, that's more for you to make sure that you're keeping up. And so, I'm not telling you it's unimportant. But it was just a way to try to teach you how to manage yourself. We're, what we've done in here aligns with that because it was designed around basically what we do in 738. To get you where you needed to be, to give you kind of an idea of where you are. So it's the project. What's important here is what you come out of this class with and what you're going to present on Saturday, December 4th, not the consultant. That's what's important. That's your proposal. That's what the College of Ed says yay or nay on. And I am the College of Ed. So as long as I'm happy, then everything will be fine. But as you know, I am a grumpy old man. If it's not good, I will not hesitate to remind you that it's not good. And so I think you might have been roasted already a time or two, but that's what I do. And so I can't apologize for who I am. I'm just a grumpy old man. I'm not a ballerina. It's not.
Dr. Lamb. Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
I think that the confusing part about this may be because our coursework has been out of order, because
Yes.
most of us have done phase 2 long time ago. And
Right.
so it feels like we did a lot of work that we didn't know what we needed to know to
You
do
did.
necessarily. And
Yep.
so,
That's why we're phasing out the consultancy shell. Y'all didn't need to know that, but I'll just go ahead and tell you, because we have too many folks who are out of order. And not just because y'all started off cycle, we have people who come and go, who are in and out. And as soon as you get off cycle, you get the cart before the horse. Remember, I am the 800-pound gorilla. I will always be the one that says yay or nay. That won't change no matter how many shells you have. I am the methodologist, for good or for bad, and until you get a new one. And when you get a new one, that person will be the 800-pound gorilla. That's the way it works in doctoral studies. Your methodologist is the person that you have to make happy, always. That's why they're the methodologist. You don't pick the new person who just came in, who can't find the building 3 days out of 5. The oldest, grumpiest person is always the methodologist. That's just the way it works at every college. And so methodology is more about experience than it is about just knowing numbers. If I can't, when you bring me a problem, if I can't fix it in 5 minutes, I'm not a methodologist. That's why I get called to proposal defenses all the time. And it's my job to be able to sit there in a minute or two, not having read their stuff, but still be able to fix their methodology. That's what you pay me to do. That's what you pay a methodologist to do. They're supposed to be able to conceptualize what you're trying to do and do it instantly. It's kind of like, who's the best dancer in the world? It's Ginger Rogers. They said, well, I thought it was Fred Astaire. No, she does everything Fred does, but does it backwards, wearing high heels. That's kind of me. You have people who've been with you for, been methodologists on some dissertations or dissertation practice or consultancy for 2 years and couldn't figure it out. And I'm supposed to do it in 5 minutes, but that's the role of the methodologist. If I can't figure it out in 5 minutes, then I don't know what I'm doing. And so again, you have to make me happy. If you make me happy, then all is well. And that, remember, we're playing for keeps here. This is real stuff. I mean, there's time and money and organizations dependent on this stuff. Your careers are dependent upon this stuff. We can't turn you loose to go out and malpractice on people. That kind of makes them mad. Even if they're not paid, they don't want you to malpractice on them. Now, this is real life. You know, we're grown people here. Sometimes you get your feelings hurt in real life. That's part of the process. And so you can't ever forget, we're doing action research here. And that means it's live. I could use a lot more metaphors, but they wouldn't be appropriate here, given what's happened recently. It's, you know, on the movie set where one person got killed, and they were supposed to be doing, but they thought it wasn't real life. But sometimes it's real life, folks. You always treat guns as if they're loaded, even if they're supposed to have blanks in them. This is real life. And even though these are projects that you folks are doing for a degree, it's still real life. It's still live fire. You got to know that. You can't malpractice on folks. You got to be careful about those kinds of things. All right, who's going to fire the first? That's a terrible metaphor. Who's going to start us off today? All right.
You want me to share?
Tim had a question though. Before.
Got a question, Tim?
Yes, and then I'll share mine. I can share. For the final project, I know that there's like the PowerPoint and everything, but isn't there like a paper that goes along with?
You write all this down in the same format as the final. That's why it's a Word document. You can just take and just start filling it in. That's why I provided you that Word document. Let me share my screen. All right, let me get out of that. Move that out of the way. Again, this final presentation PowerPoint, you'll develop your PowerPoint out of that. Your actual project presentation will follow this outline. That's what it should look like. You should just write it in. This would be considered your written proposal. This is your final project. You just write it in, and then you make your PowerPoint out of that. Biggest problem students have, they write their final presentation and their PowerPoint doesn't match. Or they try to take, just copy and paste their PowerPoint. I was working on one late last night. And I had to go back and add about 10 slides in. She wanted to tell her story. Remember, you're telling your story, but you're telling it in a format, an academic format. You're telling it in this format. And so I had to go back and do that. And so when I got through with hers last night, I had to modify it a little bit. That's what I was doing last night. A mixed method analysis of nonprofit identified programs need and recommended plan of action. So we got to make sure there's their background, there's their purpose with their problem. Lit review theoretical framework. Here's the one she used. Here's her analysis with her her SWOT analysis, quantitative data. She's got to click to add and tell us how did she collect her quantitative data? How did she collect her qualitative data? She didn't add those in. She did her needs assessment because that's what she said she was going to do. She didn't have the findings from her needs assessment. Here's her communication plan that she was going to use. Here's her financial plan. Here's her recommendations. This is Findings and recommendations for future practice. Here's her graphic organizer of her specific plan. This is the deliverable to the organization, 2, 3 references, and then questions. And so as you can see, well, I did some other work as well. It's got to follow that format. It can look a little bit different, but we got to know how you collected your data. You know,
But I thought we weren't supposed to collect data. I'm
this is
just
for a
I'm
final
confused.
presentation. She is finishing later this semester. Next month, she is doing her final. This is a final presentation. Final. But remember, you simply take what you proposed. It's in future tense. You simply change it to past tense. This is what I did. This is the way you do this. I told you, 11 of the 12 that presented this summer got through. Guess why the 12th one didn't get through? I told you why. Because when we went to his final defense, what did I pull up as the methodologist? I pulled up his presentation, his proposal from 738. He proposed, his proposal was he was going to do a program evaluation of a peer leadership program in high school. That's what he proposed to do. That's what he was approved to do. When he showed up at his final defense, he came to defend the implementation of a trauma-informed curriculum in elementary school. Guess why he didn't get through? They did not match. What's the first thing that I'm going to do when you come to your final defense in your last semester? I'm going to pull up your proposal. And that's what I'm going to be prepared to have you defend. And it better run in that same format as your proposal did. The proposal creates the blanks. You do the research, your final, you simply fill in the blanks. This is what I said I would do. This is what I did. They have to match. If they don't match, it's no bueno. You get to keep paying us and keep going. It's just that simple. You know, you need, this is grown person talk now. If your feelings are hurt, you know, I can't help you. Your proposal is what you propose to do. It has a format, regardless of whether it's dissertation practice, consultancy, capstone, it doesn't matter. They all have the same format when you come in and propose. Then we turn you loose to go and collect your data. And then you collect your data, you write your reports, and that's why I said you stick it in their hand and you run out the door. You don't have to implement the plan. Your job is to come up with the plan and hand it to the organization. And then when you come in and defend at the end and say, I want to be Dr. Williams, you're not assured to be Dr. Williams. You come in and you have to defend your project. And if it doesn't follow that format, or if you did something completely different than you proposed, then the answer is no. I'm telling you, the methodology is the heart of the actual defend, you know, proposal defense, final defense. It's all about your methodology. It's all about, you know, starting with a problem, developing it, the scientific method all the way through. What is your theoretical framework? That will guide you in how you collect data, and what data you collect is your theoretical framework. That's why I love the second case study. It shows you what happens. That person didn't learn anything from Hertzberg. You know, they put a middle column there collecting data. Can't do that if you're collecting satisfaction data. Satisfaction is not on a continuum according to Hertzberg. That's the kind of stuff you're supposed to learn along the way when you're doing your theoretical work. My job is to put everything you've learned in the first 4 classes. That's where you learn everything. You learn all the background stuff in the first 4. And then the middle, and then the middle time here is more of after the fact. You'll continue to learn, but you'll be working more on you than learning theoretical concepts, frameworks, culture, organizations, all that stuff, and methodology. This is where we take and make everything you learned in the first 4 courses make sense. And then you'll be different. You'll be changed after this, kind of like the peak test. After this treatment, you won't be the same group. I couldn't even get that out without laughing. After this treatment, you will not be the same. You're not supposed to be the same. I'm supposed to take and pound all the rough edges off of you. I don't do it in the gentlest way. I do it in a much more gentle way than was done to me 35 years ago. But that's immaterial. Society has evolved. But there's still some lessons that you have to learn that don't change with time. The scientific method does not change. It is the accepted method for doctoral, for terminal degrees, regardless of what the final project is. Dissertation and practice, consultancy, capstone, doesn't matter. There is a process that is accepted throughout the world called the scientific method. We can't get away from that ever, or it wouldn't be a doctorate. It'd be something else. It'd be a certificate program.
So, Dr. Lamb, so just to clarify, so what we're presenting in this class on December 4th, that's the proposal piece, and that needs to match up when we defend next fall,
Yes.
or what have you.
Why would you propose to do something and then walk into something different?
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Absolutely. Just I was thinking, yeah, that clarifies it. So.
Yes. Yes, I save all of these and I bring them up and share them with everybody that's on the committee that day. This is what David said he was going to do. And they actually read it before you come in. Surprise, surprise. They will read this. Because it may be different than the people that show up at your proposal, and they may not even show up at your proposal. But now they'll show up at your final defense. And they'll want to know, what do we expect to see today? And I'll share that with them. This is what we're expecting to hear from David today. He's been doing this project with Union County on planning. And then David comes in doing something, trying to raise 3rd grade reading scores. We're like, what?
Dr. Lamb, one more question. So Dr. Jones has always told us, like, if we had to make tweaks to our project, we can, come back and do it. So if we have to tweak anything in our proposal, do we need to resubmit that to you so that they match, like you said at the end?
You need to tell me.
Okay.
What your tweaks would be. I don't like being a mushroom. You
Okay.
don't need to keep me in the dark. And you definitely don't need to tell me a story like no substantive changes. And it's not even remotely close to what you proposed. If there's going to be any changes, I need to know. I don't need to be, the last to know, the proverbial husband, the last to know. I need to be the first to know. If you've got any substantive changes, and you say, well, all right, so what is the substantive change? Well, doing a program evaluation in the high school is a proposal, and then doing a program implementation in an elementary school, that would be a substantive change.
Can you pull up the data analysis project? It's in there. It's DEOL 738 data analysis project, applying the tools of qualitative evaluation form.
Okay. Let's see. Right here.
Yes.
Yeah. So right here are your right here are your, let's see what this one is. All right, so here's the big one. This is the one that you feed everything into, right?
Mhm.
And then you want to know, well, what's qualitative and quantitative? Where am I going to get that? Well, I have provided you this handy dandy, and thank you, Tim. I thought y'all all knew this, but I was wrong. I have provided you a handy dandy for those two bullets that say qualitative and quantitative. I have provided you an outline of how to do those. They're right here. You fill these out and you slip them into the bigger one. Right here, I expect to see in the qualitative, right here. And it even speaks to your what you're going to be doing right here. This is what you slip in there. This one's, 2 to 3 pages on what you're going to do on qualitative. And then you've got 2 or 3 pages. And again, they go right here. Let me see. They go right here.
And for those, so, and I'm just making it plain, and
Yeah.
just myself, and I hope this helps everyone else. So for my project, I am looking at the university libraries, and I'm since we have quantitative, that's what I'll talk about. So what I've been doing is, or what I plan to do is pull numbers up from the past 5 years that kind of tell the story of what, how the fundraising efforts have been going on at the library, and then use that data along with the literature that I've already used because I wrote the PLR already, to pull recommendations to help the library raise more money due to the research problem, which is a lack of funding, budget cuts from the federal and state government. So is that what we're doing? I'm just trying to, because I just feel like it's based on what Dr. Jones has said in class. If I'm wrong, you can tell me I'm wrong. And then hearing like this point now, I kind of feel like it's been a disconnect. And I feel like some of the work that I've done up to this point is in vain. And that doesn't sit well with me, because I put in a lot of work to get to at least to the point where I feel like I am now, because I've been done with phase 2 since about August of this year, and I've been in what I thought was phase 3. So I'm just, that's all. I just want to know.
I don't understand what you've done in vain.
I've started collecting data, pulling numbers.
But I don't understand why that's in vain. If you're collecting data, if you're at that point, the only thing excuse me, I asked them. They said we had people that were going to go forward and start. I said, just make sure they've done the IRB, and we'll accommodate it later on. We just don't go out in public and say we collected data before the methodologists turned us loose. One of the things that you have to understand about the university process is people have positions and they have egos that go with them. Mine is big as the great outdoors. You already knew that. And one of the things that we don't want to go out and tell people is we're ahead of you. We've already gone out and done this. They're supposed to get to say yay or nay at your proposal defense time. But 99% of the people who do dissertations or who do capstones or do consultancy have already got their data in the bag, because you would not be very smart to propose to collect data that you're not sure you can get. You're just not supposed to tell that part. You don't tell everything you know. That's how I've stayed married for 37, going on 38 years. I don't tell everything I know. That's the way the world works. And so you've not done anything in vain. But now, you've got to understand, again, the process. You have to propose. The College of Ed has to say yes. That happens after you have the methodology course. But again, if you're smart, you've already got your data in the bag. But I'm not supposed to tell you that, but you're supposed to be smart enough to know that you can't, hope is not a plan. I can't hope that I'm going to get this data. I'm gonna go out there. If I can't get it, I'm gonna do something different. But it's not very practical to propose something you're not sure you can do. But again, the university process, universal process is the College of Education gets to say yay or nay on your research project at a formal step. That is a formal step in every terminal degree. There is the formal step of project approval of a proposal defense and a final defense in every one. Now, at the final defense, we may have people who don't want you to get done, but the only two people that matter are me and Dr. Hamilton. The rest of them, we appreciate their opinion, but that means little to us. We appreciate, their input, but it's just that, it's just input. If I don't sign off and he don't sign off, or if we do, you get through. And so it's pro forma, it's perfunctory, whatever you want to call it. So you haven't done anything in vain. You've followed the processes, mirror one another. You have done these things, but you still have to go through the process. But if you've already know that you're going to be able to get your data, you've already got it. That makes life a whole lot more enjoyable than showing up at a defense and you're defending something you're not sure that you can get the data on. That would not be my recommendation as a best practice.
Okay, that adds some, at least for me, and I don't want to speak for my class, but that adds some clarity to some questions that I've really had.
Mm-hmm. But the good thing about the DEOL program is, at least for the time being, now this may change, but at least, for the time being, as I am the methodologist, the part right now is y'all don't have to go through the university's IRB. Now, the IRB person doesn't like that, and she is protesting that vociferously. But you can imagine how much what she wants matters to me. Less than nothing. She doesn't, Heather. I don't mean that in an ugly way. I like Dr. Jones, but she doesn't. Again, the only two people who get a vote are me and Dr. Hamilton. That would be it. We are the only two full-time faculty. Only full-time faculty get a vote.
So can I just say just a comment, maybe? I'll just speak for myself. So I'm low-key real stressed right now in this very moment, simply because I feel like Tim said, there's been a lot of confusion about the expectations. So I just want to make sure in the future, whomever the consultancy person is who's over the cohort, can we sure that everyone's on the same page? Because I feel like there's been some confusion about that. Just that way, it's all consistent, that we're all getting some information at the right time. Just, putting that in the space.
Again, the first 4 semesters, you had different folks who worked with you along the way. Understanding you now from this point forward, I am the person that you have to make happy. I am your methodologist. I am the 800-pound gorilla sitting on the couch that you can't ignore. These people contributed, they helped, they got you to this point. They had you do things that weren't exactly what you were doing in your consultancy because of the learning that came with those. All those things were wonderful. They weren't time wasted or misspent. But you have to understand, in all doctoral programs, at some point you go to the methodologist, and that methodologist now becomes in charge of you. That methodologist is the person that the university has entrusted to make sure that when you get through the end, that you don't produce something that could have been written in crayon, that it is representative of the terminal degree that that university conveys. Every doctoral program is this way.
Oh,
No
that's
matter what.
fine. I'm just saying that there needs to be clarification from the beginning about that. So just so that we have a clearer picture. That's all I'm saying. That would have been helpful.
I thought everybody, well, again, I apologize, but it should have been clear from the very beginning that the first 4 semesters were, as all doctoral programs, first 4 semesters always about learning. And then you go to the methodologies. And then after that, the methodologist is in charge of your progress from there in, because it's all about that final project, whether it's dissertation project. I mean, you don't matriculate based on the classes you pass from a doctoral program. Let me be clear. You don't matriculate from a doctoral program as opposed to every other program you've ever been in. You don't matriculate from a doctoral program based on the coursework or the grades that you made or the stuff that you pass. It's only about the final project. It's only about their dissertation if you're in one of those. And this, it's only about your capstone, the consultancy, period. Just like the fellow that didn't get through this summer, he passed all of his classes with flying colors. That was not his issue. That's not why he did not graduate and was not hooded at the, hopefully he will be this fall. He's been continuing to work. But in the end, it's all about this project at the end. It's about defending your final project. All doctoral programs are this way. If that was not conveyed, I apologize. But you have to understand, the first 4 classes are just learning. All the things that you learned or did won't all directly go to your capstone project. They had you doing activities and things just for the learning that came in those. That's what the coursework is about. But in the end, what will matter is your final defense of your project, that project in its final defense. That's what will matter in the end. That is how you will matriculate or not. You have to understand that. It's all about methodology now. Everything is pointing toward that now. First 4 semesters, I told you when I got you, first 4 semesters, you learned a lot of stuff. I've got to put some direction and get some methodology on it. And now we're going to go forward. We make a sea change in the middle of the program. All doctoral programs do the same thing. We have to now start working toward that final goal. First half, we're just learning. Second half, we're going toward that goal, which is that final proposal defense, that final defense. And so I'm getting you ready for the first part of that journey is your proposal. Putting that proposal together now. All the things that you've done, all the things that you've learned, everything that you've done will not go in your proposal. There's a lot of stuff you did in your first 4 classes that was just for learning's sake only.
They should have you make a video saying what you just said that they share with students who start in this program, because that would be very helpful for people to know. And even as they're thinking about when they have to have an idea for a project, that's not first semester or second semester, which we were told we had to have an idea by the end of second semester. Yeah. So you explaining that in person or by video, I think would make a big difference to groups starting out.
Well, again, I've said this and I've told the folks that I work with 1,000 times, I don't even want you to have a notion until you get to me what you can do. Just find somebody to partner with by the end of your 4th semester. That's all I care about, is when you get to me that you say, I have somebody I want to work with. And I say, good, we'll start. I don't want folks, I've ranted this. Folks partner too early before they know what they're doing or why they're doing it. That's why 99% of the consultancies that fall through, and that's about half of them, are because we partnered too early. And that's number 1. Number 2 is we thought it was an internship and not a consultancy. It's not an internship. You don't just go and show up and be free labor. You're supposed to add to them. You're supposed to, They're supposed to learn from you, not vice versa. It's not an internship. These are things that I have preached and preached and preached. Now, we're going to make some of these changes because the program review came up and I finally got to have my say. And so the lady came from Pepperdine and did all that. And so we're going to drop the consultancy shell. We're not going to do project management anymore. I think it's redundant. It's too much. I have argued that from the beginning. And so, but everybody thinks that I'm just feathering my nest. Look, I'm old enough I've retired twice already from previous, I'm old. I can go on. I'm actually going to train 2 new methodologists this spring. And I'm going to move along. This was never about feathering my nest, but people in the university system, everybody thinks if you don't go along that you're trying to get one over on them, but you're wanting to feather your nest and further your career. I've already had my career. I don't aspire to be anything other than what I do now. I do this methodologist. I'm a program coordinator in another program that's much bigger and larger than this, more significant in terms of impact. I do this because I can, and this is kind of one of those kinds of things. So it's never about me or never been about me, but if we do consultancy, you don't even need to think about a partner until your 4th semester. You need to learn something first, and you don't need to start doing any work until you're in your 5th semester with me. That way you don't get started one way and then then I have to try to figure out a way for you to go a different way or whatever. But the program was written years ago this way. It was written for y'all to partner in your 1st semester. And it was also written like in the old days where it was supposed to be a surprise midway, and it was supposed to stress you and make it hard and do all that. I don't know why. But it was written that way for a purpose, because it was written like programs were written back in the middle of the last century, that it was supposed to be a surprise. Doctoral students, if you don't sweat blood, then you haven't been through the experience. Again, it's kind of like hazing, because they were put through it, then they put you through it. I don't see the value in that myself. But that's just me. I don't see the value in why we have to do that. So we're going to start not doing anything with consultancy in the first 3 semesters. We're only going to introduce it until later on. You find a partner in the 4th and then do the methodology in the 5th and start your project. That the project lasts, between the partnering, the methodology, and the data collection, 3 semesters and you're out. That you will only be in consultancy for 3 of the 9 semesters. That's all you need to be. That's it. And so we've gone through the 5-year review and the program revision, and Dr. Hamilton is slowly turning this battleship, remembering that he didn't write this program, he inherited it. And so, but he is slowly turning this battleship to make it more responsive to the workday world. And part of what's helped is, I hate to say it, is COVID. That has actually helped in terms of getting people to understand that we have to fit the modern world better than we did in the past. That has brought that into focus. And so we're dropping consultancy shell. We're dropping the project management piece. We're not going to do anything with consultancy in the first 3 semesters. You'll introduce consultancy in the 4th semester and start looking for somebody to partner with, and then we'll do the methodology, and you'll understand why you're partnering with them, and you'll get in, get out, and get your data. No more than 3 semesters. And so in semesters 4, 5, and 6, find a partner in 4, figure your methodology, in 5, collect your data, in 6, and you're gone. Biggity bangity boom. And then in the 7th, you write it all up. In the 8th, you put together your executive summary, and then the 9th, you defend. Just that simple. A much more clean and quick process, a lot more focused on the outcome, a lot less of the unknown kind of thing. Now I will say this, for my folks that I do consultancy with early on, they don't like it. What I just described to you, they don't like it. They want somebody to tell them what to do in the first semester. They want to get started in the very first semester, just like I'm sure some of y'all did until you figured out maybe that's not the best thing. But you have to, you know, just like you folks are saying, we shouldn't have done it this way. We started too early and done all that. On the other hand, they're over chomping the bit. Why can't we get started? Because you don't know anything. That's why. That's just kind of like, you know, people who claim that, you know, they're not good test takers. Well, I never knew. I didn't do well on tests if I didn't know anything. You know, there's, you know, not being a good test taker is not a thing. We've made it a thing. It's simply we don't have knowledge of the subject. That's why we don't do well on tests. It's not, you know, people aren't we aren't certain things we have come to be in education and learning that aren't really real things, like not being a test taker. That's not a real thing. It's, you don't do well on tests if you don't know anything. Well, that kind of goes through to doctoral studies is you don't do a very good job if you don't know anything. And you can't know anything. You can't know it until we get you through 4 semesters of learning the, you know, the core content. You don't really know enough to start a consultancy, but we can't convince you of that because you don't, you know, you again, back to, we have certain beliefs that we're not going to change. And even though the data tells us that that's not right, but, you know, but doctoral students all think that when they get in the doctoral program that they're ready to do their dissertation, their capstone. They're not. They're just not. You need 4 semesters of trying to learn something. And that's what I go and meet with mine every semester and tell them, learn something this semester. What can we do on consultancy? Learn something this semester in your class. That'd be the best thing you can do. Don't wet your pants. It'll be okay. We'll get there. But you're trying to go too early. Whatever you do, we're going to have to change half of it. You know, again, we go back to John Boland. He was the first of our group. He was an early adopter. He was the first one in our group of the dog fighters on Saturday morning at the Far City Municipal Golf Course. He was the first one to adopt a metal-headed driver. Everybody else was still hitting persimmon. John got him a metal-headed driver. I asked John, how's that new driver? He said, oh, I can hit this one 20 yards further into the woods than I could my old. It doesn't do any good to go more, faster, farther if you're going the wrong direction. And you know, Vera's in the doctoral program now. You don't know who Vera is, not important, but Vera is the bell cow. Vera was the best master's student we've ever had. Vera's the best doctoral student we've ever had. You would aspire to be Vera. But even Vera, the best doctoral student we've ever had, best master's student we've ever had, is not ready to do a dissertation in the first semester. She's got to learn something. Vera knows that. Vera's smart enough to know that. That's a good thing. But majority of students that we get think they can start their dissertation day one. They can't. Or their capstone day one. They can't. And they're so, you know, so gung-ho to get started that what over the years has happened is they just let them start. And sometimes you just have to tell people you don't know enough to start yet. You have to have critical conversation. Just wait, it'll be okay. You won't be behind. You won't be rushed. And the best part is you won't have this sense that you did work that you, because you didn't know what you were doing, you did things that now you feel like weren't relevant to what you're doing. And you did do a lot of things that aren't exactly relevant, but they were all in learning. So it's not time wasted if you learn something. But now, yes, Dr. Jones knows to pull back on the consultancy skills. That's already been shared. It was shared at the last, the EOL faculty meeting Wednesday before last, that we're going to phase those out. That we're getting students started too fast, and it just goes to hell in a handbasket. Especially when, we have some that are on their third or fourth partnering institution by the time we actually get them where they need to be. And they've stopped and started that many times. And so again, you are now in methodology. You're going to walk out of here with a plan for you to execute going forward. We're going to check on that plan at your final defense. That's where you are. If you have collected data, that is smart. Just don't tell everybody that you've collected data. That you know where you're going to get your data or how, or that you've already collected your data. That's a secret that you need to keep. You're not supposed to tell us that. But yes, because you don't have to go
Dr.
through the
Lamb.
IRB, we can do that. Yes.
I just want to make a disclaimer for myself. I can't speak for anyone in this class. But I didn't come in with any preconceived notion of my dissertation and practice consultancy project. I just came in with our first class with Dr. Hamilton and the research and information that I did apply for. I came with an open mind. In fact, I didn't have a topic decided. I had some things that maybe was my interest, but I also thought about my professional interests. And Dr. Hamilton said, you think about that. But I had no preconceived notion. I speak for myself. I can't speak for anyone here. So if the university thinks that people are coming in, I never thought about that, because to be quite honest with you, I was willing to learn and I wanted to learn. That's why I came here. Those other universities that I got an opportunity to come in. And what I liked about Gardner-Webb was what you mentioned earlier, action research. I didn't want to do traditional research.
Right.
And because I didn't know how that benefited me. In my almost 30-year career, I wasn't looking to get tenure anywhere. So in terms of, I wanted to go out and help organizations and
Right.
get scholarly information, but I didn't come in that way. I'm still learning a lot. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate your candidness this morning. I appreciate that, because I think that obviously there has to be some struggle through any kind of education. That's what makes us better, and not in the fact that some communication was not given to us up front. I would have liked to known up front Dr. Jones's purpose with respect, and I think it's been mentioned to you, Dr. Lamb, because now I can get ready for that, and it could make my learning experience a whole lot better. Not that it hasn't been, I've enjoyed it, but I came in with no preconceived notions, Dr. Lamb, and I've learned just in this semester. I can tell you, I've learned so much. I'm still, and it's good stuff. It's real good stuff. You and I met last week, and I'm still putting things together with my capstone. But I appreciate your efforts to get things changed. And change doesn't come overnight.
No.
And so I appreciate you going to bat to get this twisted. So future students that's coming, they don't have to deal with what you're trying to get through. That's a great change that you had to get through without, I don't want to say a word wrong words here, but that's perseverance. So we appreciate that. So any help that you give us, help us with, we're gonna receive it, understanding that you're explaining it to us, and this has not been explained to us previously.
Well, again, you've got a number of constituencies here. You've got students and their expectations. You've got creditors, their expectations. You've got the folks who do the review, who come in on the teams. You've got the university. You've got all these people who have all their notions of what programs ought to be and what the experience ought to be. But one of the things that you folks got to understand is you're fighting 100 years of tradition in terms of what the process for a terminal degree is. And traditionally, these things were not divulged to graduate students. They weren't to me. And I went to a pretty good school. You know, I matriculated at Chapel Hill, and that's pretty good school. My postdoc was at Harvard. That's a pretty good school. They don't tell you any of this stuff because that's just the way the system has always worked. I prefer full disclosure. Let's move into modern times with what we're doing with adults. But again, I digress.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Okay. And full disclosure, you already know this, that I implemented and collected data from last year, and then I'm starting again with my program for this year. So I know in my project proposal for this course, I'm writing future tense as if that didn't happen. But when I get to my defense, Dr. Jones has said over and over again how powerful it will be that I had one set of data and I was able to improve my program and launch a second. But really, all of that would happen before my project gets approved. So do you think I should only do what's moving forward?
No, we do this all the time.
Okay.
Nobody's going to go back and get their watch and the calendar out and do a timeline on you. Trust me.
Okay.
But we can't say in our proposal that we've already collected data. It always has to be future tense. That's just the way doctoral proposals have been written from the beginning of time. That is just pro forma, you know. And again, I don't stand too high on ceremony. I'm tall enough already. Same thing. I met with a group in person Saturday before last, and I get the same thing. You're taller in person than we thought you'd be. And I have to remind people, I'm sitting down when I do these Zooms. You know, and so I'm tall enough. I don't need to stand on anything, but or we don't. But there's a pro forma that you have to do. A proposal, again, remember, these people have titles, they have positions, and you're supposed to respect that. You're not supposed to come in and say, this is what I've already done, like it or not. It is a student faculty relationship still, where you are to propose to these people in future tense and they say yes, and then you go and do what you've done. But that is as old as time. That goes back to the dons at Cambridge and Oxford. That goes back again to the beginning of time in academia. That the graybeards, mine's white, it used to be gray, now mine's white. That the graybeards, that you have to honor them. And part of that is you don't tell them everything, but that's just how doctoral studies work. Even at a little suitcase college like Gardner-Webb, it still works. Everybody still has egos, and you can't come showing up and saying I did this and I did that. Without their approval, they get to put the approval. Now, again, we may have some of the dignitaries show up at your proposals and we may not. And that's the part that's kind of aggravating but again, that's part of that, that's part of that ego of professorship is I don't have to show up at your proposal. I can just show up at your final. We had a person show up, was a full faculty member, was actually a full professor, showed up at a final defense and said, I've never been a school superintendent. I did not, and it was a narratology on school superintendents, and said, I've never been a school superintendent. I didn't read your study, but here's what you need to do to fix it. I can't make that up. And just that direct term said, I've never been a superintendent. I haven't read your study. I haven't read all chapter 5. I hadn't read any of your 5 chapters. It didn't come to your proposal, but here's what you need to do to fix your study. You know, and so I had, as the methodologist, I had to broker that right quick. And I said, here's the quick fix. We'll change the name from narratology to grounded theory. And everybody said, yeah, that makes sense. That'll fix it. And we went on about our business. Now that could have been a major sticking point, because that person is a superintendent in a local district. Would have been a political nightmare for this person to walk in and say something that stupid. But that's kind of the things that happen from time to time. So remembering that, you know, hopefully it'll just be us or maybe another person or two at your proposals. But as long as I say they're good, they're good. And then when we get to your final defense, the only 2 votes that really matter are mine and Dr. Hamilton. We're the only 2 that have a vote. We're the only full professors. We're the only full faculty. Everybody else is less than that in the university structure, not less than as people. But remembering the university structure, everything is all about chain of command in universities. That's the way it works. Your positional power is all that matters in the university hierarchy of how things work. So that's unfortunate, but that's how it works. Are we going to do y'all's presentation right quick? One of them before we go to break?
Can everyone see?
Yes.
All right. So my group was Alexandria, Candace, Kim, and myself. And of course, this is the giving feedback case study. So for just the background on the case, Jasmine was a team leader of 11 people in the customer service specialist, and she was asked to help grow and develop as a leader. So we do have some assumptions about Jasmine, just based on, well, assumptions, that's what it says. And yeah, I'm not going to read. I'm just going to keep moving forward. There was feedback given to Jasmine based on her from her employees, based on what how they felt about her. They believed that she was too limited. She didn't include people in making decisions. She didn't know how to read the room, which that speaks to like some of her inappropriate jokes. And team members wish that she was more direct. So taking that feedback and then also understanding that we need to apply it to theory, my group thought that double loop learning was something that we wanted to take as we move forward with explaining to Jasmine how she can get better. So we know that double loop learning is insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again without any changes. And as we approach the way to help Jasmine become a better leader and to make a better team dynamic, we wanted to let her know, like, if you aren't able to change some of the behaviors that you're having that's causing the team to have some of the results that they're having, you know, you may be the problem. And I know that's the hard reality, but you know, we learned in this class that sometimes people are the problem. They continue doing the same actions over and over again. So now moving on, still employee feedback. We're gonna use Jahari's window to talk about to help Jasmine and help us understand what her issues are and the areas of improvement. So just a quick reminder of what Jahari's window is, because I know we haven't done this since probably the first or second semester. But We have the open area, which is known by self and known by others. We have the blind spot, which is not known by self, but known by others. And then we have, well, they're all there. We'll keep going. And as I move forward, here's some of the areas that we thought could improve, that we could share with Jasmine, that we can help her become a better leader. So we thought that so it's known that she doesn't involve teammates in decision making. Is known to the group, but maybe not known by her, that that she's not professional when it comes to like what she says, how she reads the room. Her humor is not good, and it's causing the team to really have issues with how she works. We also see, if we go back to, to what's not known by others but known by self, that we think that she may be an insecure leader. And then what we don't know, and no one knows, is how Jasmine will respond to the feedback from the consultant. Will she make changes? Will it be, will we be able to implement like the double loop theory, or will she need to be removed because she's not making the changes to make the team successful? So now I'm going to move to the next slide for Kim.
So as part of delivering feedback to Jasmine, we talked about a couple of strategies that we would use. The first is just to introduce the feedback to level set and introduce the why we were doing this, why we're having this conversation. How was the data collected and who was surveyed for the data? So she just understands the situation going in. And then we specifically talked about strategies for delivering feedback. We landed on the situation behavior impact, or the SBI model, but there are many others that essentially convey the same message. So focusing on the situation, acknowledging the behavior instead of focusing on like a personal attack, and then acknowledging the impact. So for instance, the situation is the team members indicated that they like being included in decision-making. The behavior was when you give notice of what's happening from corporate, and then the impact is it makes the team feel included in investment. And similarly, you could also do that with negative feedback, focusing specifically on the behavior and the impact. Next slide. So the agenda for this one-on-one meeting, we would essentially first just check in, see how she's doing, sort of set the stage, approach it in a neutral space so that she doesn't feel attacked, review the purpose of the meeting and of the consultancy, remind Jasmine that she's the one who wanted this feedback, and then talk about strategies that we use. So one-on-one surveys and observations. Our findings, we would focus on the strengths and the weaknesses both. We would discuss areas of improvement, how the improvement will impact the organization, the timeline for rectifying concerns. We felt like this was appropriate as we tied back to that double loop learning, that we revisit some of the feedback to make sure and to reinforce the need for that double loop so that it's not that continual pattern that we saw with her previously. And then we would discuss professional development and strategic growth opportunities. Next slide. Some of those strategic growth opportunities and professional development opportunities we discussed were tools that Jasmine could use, or that the consultant could recommend for Jasmine. The DISC assessment, so that she understands both herself and how she interacts with people, but also doing a DISC assessment with her team to understand her team and how they interact and how they receive information so that she can better work with them. We also discussed implementing a 360-degree feedback tool so that she doesn't feel like, it's just the team's perspective. If there is common feedback among all areas, it's great to have those additional data points so that she gets a more complete picture of her style of leadership and some areas that she may need to continue to do or may need improvement on. And then we also talked about the emotional intelligence assessment and training, and really focusing on how she responds to situations with her team and with her leadership. Next slide. So a plan to help Jasmine improve, we focus these in 2 areas. One, we really recommend a leadership coach. Jasmine may not be the problem, but most likely she probably is the problem in terms of interacting with her team. And so really focusing on that additional feedback, additional data points for Jasmine to consider. And then we recommended that Jasmine use some tool to understand her personal motivation. It may be the DISC assessment. It may be something like the MVS tool, which is, understanding that like as a leader, I'm motivated by data. So it's more helpful for me to get data from my peers and from my colleagues to help me make decisions in a more timely manner. And so understanding that about herself will also allow her to make better and more timely decisions, which is one of the feedback areas that she got from her team. The next thing we focus on is team development. So making sure she's able to set up structured time to meet with the teams. She is able to delegate responsibilities. It sounds like she has meetings back to back. We know that her team likes to be included. So why doesn't she delegate some of those meetings to her team, allow them opportunity to be involved in the decision-making while also freeing up additional time for them to meet with her. And then allow time for regular feedback. Again, that double loop learning, make sure that she is open to feedback and getting that on a consistent basis. Next slide. So how we're just going to really go pretty quickly through these questions. These are the questions straight from the case. So how did Jasmine respond to feedback? Most people in general are pretty defensive when they receive feedback. It takes a very confident leader to respond to feedback well, but we're going to focus on the behavior and the impact. We are not going to make, we are making sure that the feedback is not generalized. So just because you are sarcastic in one meeting does not mean that everyone hates you, and making sure that she understands those pieces of feedback. Did it accomplish what you had hoped? We would recommend to enforce that feedback, that we avoid the use of you. So instead of saying you are sarcastic, say when sarcastic comments are made. That way she doesn't feel attacked to this feedback, but she also understands her behavior. And then we would again meet in a neutral space. We already discussed that. We would start with why, and then recommend 360-degree feedback again. And then just don't generalize the feedback. And then next slide. And then what lessons should we take? Provide feedback in a private place. Again, set the tone in the beginning, so that she understands that the intent of the feedback is to promote improvement. We would focus on the behavior and not the person. We would describe the specific behavior and identify the business implications of the actions. And then we would create a plan. So next up is Alexandra.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Yes, so we talked a little bit about what we might posit based on the case study questions about Jasmine's reactions. And because we can't know, and because of some of the assumptions we made, here's some of the approaches that we posited as a result of those things, right? So Kim already mentioned that defensiveness is a natural human reaction. And so one of our assumptions that she was a newer manager, kind of thrust into the role. And so there may just be some structural functional training and development that will help her to get used to what it looks like to manage the team that she manages. Oh, okay. Oh, was somebody saying, Tim, you were saying something? No, oh, okay, sorry. We are, we assuming that she has a problem-solving mindset, depending on the industry. We want to help Jasmine to slow down a little bit to get from not just how do you get to an action that could rectify, but much like the double loop learning theory suggests, and the model suggests, you have to connect to the motivations, to the why, what's underlying the behavior, because that's what's going to help to create sustainable impact with solutions that you implement. And then as an individual, she's obviously seeking to grow, she's seeking to develop. So she has some sense of self-awareness. And so just really, again, making that connection between the behavior and the motivation for the behavior in service to her stated goal of wanting to be a better leader is going to be really important in terms of her hearing and acting on the feedback. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, some thoughts to wrap up the time. We say, you know, it's admirable that Jasmine is requesting insight, because she doesn't have to request insight into her leadership and, you know, how she's impacting, but all good leaders should seek to be self-aware and should seek the tools and resources to do what they're doing better. So it makes it easier for folks to follow, because that's truly what is demarcated by good leadership. People are actually following you. We also recognize that good feedback has two parts, and so it's just not an opportunity to you know, to tear her down or to, you know, make her feel like everything she does is crap and it needs to be changed. But it's also really an opportunity to look at what are the things that she's doing that she should continue, what are the things that are helping her team do what they need to do to perform in the way that they need to perform. And then it's clear from the feedback that in the Johari's window, she has a big blind spot. And the goal with the Johari's windows, with feedback and with tools and resources and training and development, that we continue to expand that arena area. And so we want to ensure that, again, with the DISC assessment and these other tools, that her temperament and her personality are things that are assessed, and emotional intelligence are brought to her attention, so that arena area of the Johari's window continues to grow and lessening the other areas. And then finally, how she responds, which we cannot guess, is going to be critical in terms of whether she's able to accomplish her initially stated goal and being a better leader in terms of interacting and engaging with this feedback on a consistent and regular basis. And so that is our review of the case.
Very good. Anybody have any questions? Very good. I like the take on double loop. Again, you're applying your theoretical frameworks, and that's what you have to do. We work from the known, what we know. And obviously she lacks self-awareness. So again, we would go to Johari's window. Again, you're putting together the things you learned in the first 4 semesters. These are things that you've learned. When we get to methodology, we don't guess. We don't think that's not what we paid you for. You know, we use the tools that we have gathered along the way to analyze these cases. We can't just do thought. I think this or I think that. No, this is what we've learned. This is what our theoretical foundation, our academic underpinning tells us. These are the things that we've learned along the way. But then in the end, we have to take it another level up. You're no longer the consultant. You've done a great job with Jasmine. You've hit all the notes. I've checked them off going down my list of things here. Now you are the leader of the organization, or you are a leader. So let's talk about some leadership things. Can everybody be a leader? That would be no. If we went down the list of things, the data that we know about Jasmine, are any of those things that you would write in the job description that you would want for a leader? Any of them? Any of the feedback? That would be no. So we can't see in any of the data that we have, and that's all we have is our data. We can't see in the data anything that would portend that Jasmine is anything but simply a positional leader. And this case study, and the reason why it's written in there, what is the irony of this case study? What does Jasmine's unit, her little group that she leads, what do they do? Going back to the case, customer service. Is that not just is that irony not just make you smile? Is there anything, not only leadership, which is, we know is servants, is servancy anyway. We've got Jasmine in customer service. Is there anything that we read in the data that tells us that Jasmine ought to be anywhere within 100 miles of customer service? Of course not. We know that. That's part of the irony of this case, and that's part of it is Jasmine is totally unsuited to do customer service. Now, back to Collins again. That's an oversimplification of the Get Cells and Guba social systems model, but we can use Collins in this case. She's not in the right seat. We know that. She can't be anywhere narrow. We might can develop her leadership. We might can. We'll talk about probability in just a minute. We might be able to develop her leadership, but she's never going to be appropriate for customer service. She does not have that compassion. She doesn't have that empathy gene that you have to have in order to do customer service. We can't give her that. We can't give her empathy. What is the main tenet of self-awareness? It's empathy. So Google it, look it up. That's the main tenet of self-awareness, is empathy for others. If you lack the empathy gene, you can't do customer service. Now, there might be other roles in your organization that you can fill. Now, my argument would be is we can't convert Jasmine into a actual servant leader. She can be a positional leader, but we can't convert her into a servant leader if she lacks the servant gene, the empathy gene. We know that leadership is learned skills, traits, and behaviors, but if you lack empathy, and so, in the end, if you are her employer, what is the probability that you can convert her into somebody who could be a viable leader in your organization? What is the probability? Is it high or low? It's low, isn't it? So what do? Again, we're not the consultant now. We're the leader of the organization. Remember, we've changed roles. I ask you to do that in all of these. Y'all ought to be prepared for this by now. As somebody pointed out early on in this class, this is a leadership discipline. Your degree in the end is going to say leadership on it. You are now the leader of the organization. What do you do with Jasmine? What kind of critical conversation do you have to have with her? What is the content of that conversation?
I think that you have to be honest with her. If she can't change her behavior, the company won't meet the bottom line, and which is customer service. So she will have to be removed.
Well,
Maybe she's better suited for a different position in the organization and helping her find that.
I feel like we're supposed to say that she needs to be let go. But I feel like, generally speaking, right, it costs more money to hire new people or move people, but to the contrary, we could be losing money with her in that seat if she's in the wrong seat. I feel like that motivations piece really would help me understand how to make, as a leader, to make a good decision on how to best move forward, right? Because if she's just not connecting, right, the purpose of customer service to how it should be met within the bottom line, and that may be negatively reinforced by the environment, that's one thing. But if she's just a crap person and, right, she's just doing what she does because that's just what she does, that's a whole other situation. So I always probably make it more complicated than it needs to be, but I just feel like I need more information to know.
that's never the answer. We talk about it's never.
You always say that too. That doesn't change that I think that that's the answer.
Yeah, but the data is the data. We'll never have enough. We have to go on what we have, and that's what leaders have to do. There's never enough. the solution here is it starts with the critical conversation. But the first thing that we have to do is we got to move her out of customer service, and we'll get her somewhere where, you know, it's not just a screaming siren going off 24/7 like it is there. And then we'll see if we can do some of the other things. The answer is not always just fire the person and move on. You know, this is different than the unethical leader that we had last time, who we can't have unethical people. Now, nothing in the data collection on Jasmine says she's unethical. So remember, the ethical piece is that's the deal breaker. It has to be. You have to understand that as the leader. If somebody's not honest or, you know, all the tenets of ethical, that's when you get into sexual harassment, sexual misbehavior, you know, theft. You know, the ethical piece is a deal breaker. When somebody is building their own little team inside of a team, and they're discounting or throwing away other employees, like in the last case study, the unethical behavior is a deal breaker. You can't have unethical people, because that's just the tip of the iceberg. Always, it's always just the tip. That's just the part you can see. There's always some really bad stuff underneath that if you keep them around long enough, you will regret it until you got your little box with your little plan in it walking out, they're walking you out the door. Because, you know, we talk about sports every week. What's happened to the Blackhawks this week? They covered up all this unethical behavior that ended up being more than unethical, it was criminal. And now people are getting fired, even people that worked there years ago. That's what I'm telling you. If it's bad enough, they'll reach out beyond the grave into your current job. The guy that don't even work for them anymore got fired yesterday because he was there when this happened. This unethical person that they had, they covered up the tip of the iceberg, and now they're finding, oh, there was crimes behind this as well. Well, who would have thunk it? Well, everybody that knows anything about organizations. You can't live with unethical behavior. There'll always be criminality behind it. If I can do this, why can't I do that? I mean, it's never ending on the unethical piece. Now, nothing in our data says Jasmine's an unethical person. She's just not suited for customer service. Now, there may be someplace else in the organization, but we've got to get her out of this now and work with her, and we may be able to remediate her. The probability is low, but it's Alexandra is right. It's worth a try because of the retention cost, the turnover cost. But there's nothing you say, well, her data is not any worse than John's was, but she's not exhibiting unethical behavior. She's exhibiting lack of self-awareness, lack of empathy. That's different than somebody who's unethical, because that's where we get the criminality. That's where we get the charges, the fines, the adverse publicity. This person is salvageable. Maybe we'll give her the opportunity to grow and see if she can get better. Because, and again, what differentiates this one from the last one, and this is where the learning is supposed to click in as a leader. There's certain behaviors we just cannot live with in an organization. There's others that we can try to improve. But for some reason, we tend to not understand the difference. And we've got to draw the line. And it's ethical behavior. That is the line. That's the learning piece. The juxtaposition of this case study versus the last one is both of these people were dysfunctional in their leadership roles. One because of their ethics, other because lack of empathy and awareness. We can fix that maybe. We've got some tools. You learned the tools in the first 4 courses to address this. We can't address somebody's unethical behavior. We can't give them ethics all of a sudden. We can't give that to them. That's one of those things we shouldn't have to tell you in an organizational setting that this is wrong or this is illegal. Don't do that. That will never work. So that's the juxtaposition. That's what you were supposed to, the takeaway between the two of these, two leaders, both of them very dysfunctional, both of them not being able to get the job done, both of them having issues. One we work with, one we don't. What is the difference? One's an ethical problem. The other is simply a lack of awareness, empathy, mismatched in their job. As Melody said, this is when you shift them somewhere else. They're not, they may be a good employee elsewhere, but not in customer service. They don't have the skill set yet. We can work with them on it. But you'd be better off to move them and work on it rather than to work on it in place. The die is already cast with this group, unfortunately. You don't get but one chance to fail in organizations with that group. All right, we're going to break. We'll be back in, let's take a short break. We'll be back at 10 till and we'll knock the second one out right quick. All right, who's next?
We'll go next. Well, are we good to go next? I didn't even ask my group. I just said.
Yes, yes, let's go.
Okay, perfect. I just Vaughn told us. Yeah, cool.
Marla, are you kicking us off?
I thought you were doing the background.
Oh, okay, I will, sure. Okay, we are doing our giving feedback case study, and this is Marla, Heather, and myself. All right, and as the last group mentioned, I'll just hit the highlights here. Jasmine wants to grow as a leader, so she asked for a consultant's help. She is in customer service and leading a team of 11. So the consultant has come in. You can go ahead to the next slide if you want to. And we as the consultant recognize that we're going to take the data that we get and we're going to analyze this qualitative data in order to give her tangible tools to improve. Now, we know that in qualitative data, we're focusing on themes. We're looking for the themes that emerge from the data that we receive. And you can go ahead to the next slide for me. And 3 themes emerged from the information gathered here. First, the accessibility and visibility of Jasmine. A second was the lack of emotional intelligence, specifically her own self-awareness. And third were her decision-making skills. So these are the 3 themes that we as the consultant came up with. And so we're going to take you through what our agenda would look like, and then 3 separate transcripts of what our conversation would look like with Jasmine based on these 3 themes. Okay.
Okay, so the agenda for our meeting is similar to the first group. We would start with an introduction to provide the framework for what we're going to discuss. We would talk about the goal of some of the questions that we asked. We would start with feedback and try to share any positive feedback first, and then go into the areas of improvement. Then we would summarize our findings on what we just shared. We would then ask for Jasmine's feedback just to see what her thoughts and feelings are about what was just shared with her. Then we would make some initial recommendations, but then also schedule a follow-up for after she's had some time to reflect more on what was shared, and then we would debrief after that as well. So as Melody said, we came up with 3 themes as it relates to Jasmine based on the feedback that we were provided. And we decided to do question number 2, where it talked about creating a dialogue of how the conversation might go between Jasmine and the consultant. So with the first theme of accessibility and visibility, as the consultant, I would start the meeting off by saying, "Hi, Jasmine, I hope you're well today. First of all, I want to applaud you for wanting to become a better leader. The fact that you've asked for my help with this and are willing to hear both positive and negative feedback says a lot about you wanting to grow as a leader." Jasmine would say, "Thanks. I'm anxious to hear the feedback." And then the consultant would again explain to her that the feedback has been divided into 3 themes. The first deals with your accessibility and visibility to your team. Then we would go into the feedback and say, some of the members said, "You're never around unless there's a staff meeting. You cancel meetings often, and you're never around to deal with irate or angry customers when we have them. Since we already know Jasmine can be a little defensive, Jasmine would say, I can't believe they said that. I try to be here as much as possible, and sometimes I get busy and I have to cancel meetings. As the consultant would say that was their feedback and their perception of things. But ask Jasmine to take a minute to think about it, and look to see if there's any truth to what was said, or could she understand why they might feel this way? Jasmine would say, maybe, I guess, I haven't really considered how they might feel. And then as the consultant would say, let's discuss some ways you might improve in this area. Number one is you would have to be more visible and accessible to your staff. You have to be present, in other words. Your staff has to see you. You have to be visible. You have to be around, and it just can't be for when there are staff meetings. You have to be present. Number two, you want to try to keep meetings as scheduled, or in the event you have to cancel, reschedule as soon as possible. Don't just cancel meetings and don't provide any explanation, or try to follow up with a reschedule of the meeting as soon as possible. Your staff must feel supported and that they can count on you to be responsive when dealing with angry customers. They have to feel that they can lean on you and depend on you if they can't handle the customers, especially in the event that they want to speak with someone higher up. These are some things you can do right now, and these are be 3 things that would be a good start for you. I'll give you some time to reflect on these, and we'll revisit in our debrief meeting. In the meantime, we'll move on to the next theme.
So our next thing would be emotional intelligence. So would you start by saying, let's chat about some feedback that was centered around emotional intelligence. Jasmine will say, okay, let's chat. Still not really excited, but semi-open to the experience. And then the consultant would state, emotional intelligence, explain what it is. So it's how someone manages their emotions and feelings in a positive way. It also includes having the ability to interact with others in a way that is positive and having that self-awareness. So we can say some of the feedback that we received about utilizing sarcasm and humor can at times be taken offensive, and that speaks directly to emotional intelligence. And Jasmine might respond in a way of saying, well, I don't think it's offensive, so why does it really matter? Does it actually matter? Response of the consultant would be, yes, it does matter. As a leader, you want to be able to create an environment that is positive and inclusive. And so how do we do that? Then hopefully Jasmine would say, great, let's fix it and ask questions. Then the consultant would reply and say, great, I'm glad you asked. A lot of the work around emotional intelligence is internal. To understand how to improve, you must know your specific areas of growth. So we would suggest that she takes the emotional intelligence quiz, the EQ assessment. The assessment would really allow her to get a clear picture of what she can work on, and then what tools she can utilize to actually increase her emotional intelligence, which will in turn trickle down to her teammate, to her team members. Hope Jasmine would say thank you so much, and then she will take a look at it, and then we'll move on to our next theme.
Okay, Jasmine, let's talk about one more improvement goal that could make a big difference in your leadership, and that's decision making. Are you kidding me? I try my best to let them in on decisions. I ask their opinion, and Jasmine rolls her eyes when she says that. Well, it sounds like you're frustrated with the feedback. I understand this is a lot. And as I mentioned earlier, I really appreciate the risk you took by asking for this input. I know you want to grow as a leader, so let's look at some concrete ways to do that in your decision making. Okay, I'll hear you out. I hear you saying that you want to include them. Some decisions are yours, Jasmine, and your team shouldn't be included. Other decisions can be made alongside them through consulting, consensus, voting. There are some simple questions you can ask yourself to help you choose the method of decision making. The most important part is that you make it clear up front how decisions will be made, Who is involved and why? I'd love to know more about that. I think you're right. I have struggled in this area. And then some of the recommendations that I would have as the consultant for Jasmine is to increase her knowledge in decision-making, asking the 4 questions for how to choose. Who cares about the decision? Who knows enough to be involved in making the decision? How many people is it worth involving? Thinking about the cost and the time that it would take. She also needs to increase her knowledge about group decision-making techniques. When she decides the group can make this decision, she needs some techniques and some strategies like brainstorming or nominal group technique. And she also needs some active listening strategies. And we've learned about the 4 listening tools: asking, mirroring, paraphrasing, and priming. And those would all help her with decision making. And then my final recommendation there would be that she find a mentor or a coach who shows strength in this area. Now, you could see in our different transcripts that sometimes Jasmine was negative or defensive, and other times she positively received it. And we really feel like setting the stage by reminding her that she requested this feedback. She was the one who asked for a consultant, and that these are steps to help her grow would increase the potential that her reactions would be positive. And it may take time, which is why Marla mentioned that we would set a follow-up meeting with her, some time for her to reflect and think about. The other thing that's important here is that we stick to the themes. If Jasmine wants to know who said it and what did they say exactly, we want to stick to the themes. That's what we as consultants do. We take all the information and we're the ones who analyze it. We're the ones who come up with the themes, and we stick to that and stick to our goal of improvement.
Great. So last, we just wanted to kind of close with some critical conversation tips and tricks. It's always important just to kind of refresh these in your mind whenever you're having a difficult conversation. It's not always fun, but it's like we also know it's necessary to have these things happen. So just some 8 tips. So it's like, make sure that you plan out what you want to say, because you don't want to go into the meeting unprepared. You also want to think about when a good time to approach someone is. So you don't want to approach someone when they're in a group, because that's not helpful. And that does sometimes lead to embarrassment, or they could be defensive if they're in a group setting. And during the meeting, you want to make sure that you set expectations. So like Melanie and Marla both said, like, we're going to talk about these 3 things. And our goal of this is to understand how you can improve as a leader, or how you can improve as a human, or whatever that improvement looks like. You also want to talk about feelings and don't blame them. You want to try to avoid those statements that's like, you don't respect me, or and use I statements, or the data shows that X, Y, and Z. So how can we improve? So definitely don't make it as personal and attacky, and more of just like, here's what the data says, and let's chat through it. You also want to pace the conversation, because as we all know, if we get a lot of information at one time, it can be very overwhelming, and you may not hear all of the things that come out of the human's mouth. So making sure that you kind of understand like what you want to share, pace it, make sure that it's not too much information at one time, or schedule 2 meetings to kind of make sure that you have enough space and time to give the information, also give them time to reflect. You also want to make sure that both parties are listening. That way they have a clear understanding of what's happening. You want to stay calm, because getting angry and high emotions is not always helpful when trying to express feedback. And take breaks if they're needed. So if they need a minute, say that's fine, take 5 minutes, we'll come back and we'll revisit the conversation. So just ensuring that it's a collaborative conversation, feedback is necessary, and making sure that everyone understands what the goals are is important and helpful. That's the end. Thanks for listening.
Great job. As y'all have figured out, our case studies are supposed to align with where we are in the course. And obviously this one's all about qualitative. And many of the notes that you folks just struck are on how to conduct interviews, how to give feedback, all that's Merriam. That's the stuff that we're in, and y'all hit all those notes. And there's some associated things that go along with that. And you struck on those too. And then I heard, one of my keys a minute ago that I was glad, truth. There's big T truth and little T truth, but they're both truths. What we consider in research to be big T truth is data, is numbers. That's usually quantitative. But there's a lot of little T truths in data collection that we consider that those are qualitative. And those little T truths are people's opinions. They matter, they count. They are data too. I tease Alexander every week, the answer is never there's not enough data. We have to go on what we have. But one of the things that we do naturally, and I'm not saying that Alexandria does this, but I have to catch myself from time to time, is that some reason we discount people's opinion as not being data or little T truth. And that's one of the things that we really have to work on as qualitative data people, is what we see, what we hear, what we perceive, trusting ourselves, finding those little T truths. That doesn't mean that they're not as important as the big T truths. We just use those to distinguish between quantitative and qualitative. But that doesn't make them any less true just because they're somebody's opinion. And that's what they wouldn't have told us this if it hadn't mattered. That's again, it's a truth to them. Even though it's opinion data, it's still data. We get people in my area of quantitative who think that, well, that's not real data. Well, yes, it is. It absolutely is. And you have to respect that, especially as leaders in organizations. You have to respect people's truth. You have to expect their path, you have to respect them and their perspective. And that's why I keep circling back to this notion. You can't deal with unethical people because they don't respect the organization. They don't respect others. They don't respect you. And that lack of respect, it goes bad, folks. I'll just tell you, it gets sideways. And it harms organizations. So I was glad to see that y'all caught that piece. And that's a big part of qualitative is it is those people's truth. It is their truth. Now, I think one of the things that you picked up on too is, and this is very important. This is a very important part. There is not a correlation. We'll use a term that we should understand by now. There's not a correlation between receptiveness and origination. Now, what that means is this. Just because somebody asks you to come and give them feedback does not mean that they're going to receive it. That's the big mistake that a lot of, when I was talking earlier about the number of these consultancies that fall through, when I was talking about get in, get out, and run to the bank and try to cash, here's the thing. If things were going well, they wouldn't have called you. But just because they called you does not mean that they want to hear what you have to say. You have to understand that. And that's part of qualitative. And I'm glad that y'all picked up on this one. And even though Jasmine asked for this help, she may not be receptive. She's probably not going to be receptive. And you say, well, how could you not be receptive? You asked me to come and do this. Just like in organizations. I've got one that's going to finish this spring. Yeah, that's big T truth too. Yeah. I've got one that's going to finish this spring. And she's in Asheville. And she partnered with this organization too early, and has, but we're going to get her out. It's okay. But they couldn't handle the truth. They welcomed her in, but then they don't want to hear what she has to say. And that's been hard for her. because she's a much nicer person than I am. It's not been hard for me. They're just turds. That's a clinical term, by the way, in our business. They're just turds. But she thought because they welcomed her in that they wanted to hear what she had to say. Nah. So folks don't like it, even if they're the people that called you. And that's why in the real world of consultancy, and that's why I said in our process, I was talking to earlier to Tim's comments, you don't need to partner until your fourth. You need to find your partner in your fourth semester. Fifth semester, you put some methodology, you collect in the sixth semester, and then you're done. You leave them. You go. You write it up and present it to them in the seventh, your executive summary in the eighth, and finish your final presentation in the ninth. You don't hang around. It gets really awkward when you start, even in the data collection phase, it's awkward. When you start asking questions and sending surveys and all that, it gets awkward. You're not an intern. You're not there. You shouldn't be showing up standing around the water cooler every day. It's an in and out kind of thing. That's the life of the consultant. They want you until you get there. Now, whether or not they implement your plan, that you can't base your success on whether they'll do what you tell them to do or not. And it's, you're never, again, the life of the consultant, and even in the consultancy, is that of a missionary. You take the word to people that don't want it. Well, they called me. That still doesn't mean that they still doesn't mean that they want it. Just because they're the originator does not mean that they want it. Now, if somebody sends you in the people that didn't want it, they're not. You understand that they don't want it. But the irony of the business is the very people that call you don't want to hear what you have to say. You got to understand that. And that's the whole point of Jasmine. That's one of those micro aggressions that come out of that is that she don't want to hear it. But she's the one that called it. Doesn't matter. You got to understand that. If you have this desire to be loved and revered, two jobs you should never get into. Number one, never be a consultant if you need to be loved and revered. Number two, don't be a university methodologist if you want to be loved and revered, because you're always the bearer of bad news. That's the role that you play. You have to be you have to have either the patience of Job, or you have to have be more ego than ability to do either of those jobs. I know what mine's ego, but what you need to be a good consultant is patience and understanding. That you're looking for little t truth, and it is truth, and it does matter, and it is that, but that doesn't mean that people will accept it. But you have to understand that that you've done your due diligence, you've collected the data that was available, and you've analyzed it, and that you've been ethical and honest in your behaviors and professional. That you have developed the learning and the skill set that goes along with that to be able to say with some degree of certainty, these are the things that I found. That doesn't mean that you have to accept it. And it's not a test, so I can't tell you. It's not like 2 + 2 is 4, but it's still little t truth. It is still truth, whether you like it or not. It is still truth. You have to be able to deliver that and have those critical conversations. You don't have to be, you don't have to be confrontational about it, but you have to be able to have. I love that you have to have those critical conversations. That's why, again, you have to be able to have those. Now, some people don't want to hear those. Some leaders don't want to hear that. That's the nature of our business. Is that? Do we have another presentation today? We're finished. We're done. We're good. We're ready to go. All right. So,
Doc, I was just playing. We do. We have one.
All right. I was going to move on.
Yes, sir. We'll be brief.
I thought you might have one.
Well, we do, and as Blood pulls it up, the PowerPoint,
There you
I
go.
do, Dr. Lamb, want to, I've listened to both cases. Blair is on my team, Blair, D'Amico,
And
myself.
a reminder, we want to public shout out to Jamiko. I'm working on getting his story published in the web, the video magazine that comes out on Mondays from Gardner Webb. I've hooked him up with Jackie Bridges. Hopefully we'll get a good story from Jamiko. You know, he's being honored as a distinguished young alumnus this weekend. That's why he's not with us today.
That's right.
And so let me.
Took it right out of my mouth, Dr. Lamb.
And so I have some information behind that I can show when y'all get through. But yeah, but we're trying to get a big story in the video magazine that goes national. Of course, there's a version that comes out Monday morning for students and staff and faculty. It's called the Web. Comes out on Mondays in your Gardner Webb email. That has stories in it. And so Jackie's back at work now. You know, her husband passed unexpectedly from COVID 2 weeks ago, 3. It wasn't but 59. But anyway, she's back and they've hooked up. And so hopefully before long, the story will be coming out. So it'll be great.
Dr. Lamb, was Mr. Bridges a veteran firefighter or anything?
It was Bruce
In
Bridges.
In Gaston County?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I knew about that. County manager, I didn't know him.
Yeah.
I do know Mrs. Jackie, Bridges.
Yeah. The tragedy.
That's sad. That's so sad. Well, if you want me to get started, Dr.
Yeah.
Lamb, and so Dr. Lamb, I want to definitely recognize, as you have already kind of done, want to add to it, Jamiko, for, you know, his award, and also with the process being in a group for these 4 groups. And we haven't done this before, because normally we switch up, Dr. Lamb, through the process, case studies, but I appreciate you allowing us to do these together, because we've got to know each other even much better. So Jamiko made us aware of that. And so we're certainly very proud of him. I know our case study group in the cohort as well. So he other night he said he had a headache and we didn't meet. And so I didn't know whether he was so excited for his award. So hopefully we'll find out how that went. So he's a good person, good and decent person, that is. I do want to set Dr. Lamb, you up, and our cohort, my case study group up, is that we took just a slight different approach in terms of how we saw this case, and we hope that's okay. We've heard both groups. As far as a disclaimer, we know that qualitative data matters. We also understand that the last case included the consultant and the organization with the wine company. So we were thinking in that same context, in that same venue, of not simply looking at Jasmine, but also looking at the consultants. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're going to do. So we maybe looked and analyzed a little too much, but that's okay, because we know we're trying to improve. And so that's the angle that we were coming from, kind of looking at both sides to it, Dr. Lamb. So hopefully you don't come back as too hard, but that's the angle that Blair and Jamiko was taking. We think that it
y'all
gives a
must not
perspective.
ever had anybody in class before ever that just all they ever did was just shook their head and said that's good. Have y'all not ever been in a Socratic method before where there was argument and
Yep.
I just don't understand.
Yes, sir. In my grad school, I was in Socratic at App State in the MPA program. So we can go to the first slide. Basically, what it talks about is the background, and we know the first 2 groups have already talked about. We want to kind of examine that a little bit further. We know that Jasmine is the leader of 11 customer service specialists, and Jackie wants to grow. and develop as a leader. And so, and we're looking at this, we're looking through this from the lens of the consultant. And how can we get better as a consultant? Not simply how we can make Jasmine better. I mean, that's ultimately what we want to do. We've heard that. But I think we were thinking that in order to make Jackie better and the group better, we need to be better as a consultant in terms of how we looked at it too.
Okay.
So we're looking at both sides of it. So we know that there were 11 interviews that were conducted, and the team provided feedback. And the initial impression that we received, the feedback that Jasmine may be defensive, and I want to underscore that, may be defensive. And just like Kim said, her group said, naturally, most people are defensive with feedback. And in fact, I just did the Dr. Lamb 360 feedback 3 weeks ago with Paradigm Consultant, and I got my results this week. And it does kind of challenge you a little bit. I'll use that term. We'll talk about that later. And so the initial impression that we got was that there was no real quantitative data to prove this. Only qualitative is coming. I know qualitative data is an impression.
Man,
yeah.
You better be glad that I'm a quantitative person and not qualitative. If you said that to a qualitative person, they'd reach through the screen and strangle you. Let's break that statement down. No real quantitative. So qualitative is not real.
No, I guess I could rephrase that and say
impressions. So qualitative is only impressions. It's not real data.
No, what I'm saying there, and I maybe semantically, maybe I could reword that differently by saying we didn't detect any quantitative data. That's what I mean.
Do you have to, is it only real if there's quantitative involved?
Not necessarily, no, sir.
Well, I'm telling you what, you better not let the dean of the graduate school at Gardner-Webb see this. You know she's a qualitative only.
I got you. Well, we mentioned qualitative, and so that's the assessment. And that, like you said earlier, we're here to learn.
Yeah.
And I received that in terms of how we communicate that.
I'm gonna save this one. You'll have to upload this. I'm gonna send this to her just because that's who I am. I will take your name off of it though.
Yeah. So really, what the intent there and what we meant was that there's no quantity. This is more a qualitative assessment.
But that doesn't mean it's not real. That speaks to little t truth. This is a learning thing, and I know that you understand that. But this is not the kind of thing that you would ever write down out in public, especially. You would never say, even though you were saying this to disprove it or to as a Socratic argument or playing the devil's advocate. But quite truthfully, all joking aside, you would never write this down on any professional literature or presentation. You would never do that. That is akin to setting a qualitative person on fire, literally setting them on fire. They would want to punch you in the nose. You have completely discredited their scholarship, who they are, their entire job, and their discipline. You would not want to do this out in public. Trust me.
Well, let me say this. That's not the intent of this presentation.
Right, I get it. I know.
Yeah, that's not the intent.
But be careful, even in class presentations, writing things down like this without putting the disclaimers. We don't really believe this. This is just the argument.
Yeah, we don't. Let me clarify for the cohort. There was no intent to disqualify quantitative researchers. That's not the intent of this presentation. No, we don't say that. We say only qualitative data is available with this case study. So
Right.
we're not discrediting qualitative researchers. What we're saying is there was no quantitative data.
Right, I
available.
get it, but
Yeah.
what you're implying is that that's the only real data.
No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is it's not available in the case.
That doesn't have to be. So you're assuming that there has to be both at all times. There's plenty of case study, there's plenty of data and research that there's never any quantitative, ever.
Sure.
That's not a limitation of the study that there is any quantitative. You have to understand that you don't always have to have. There's no rule that you have to have both.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a best practice in action research to get both if you're a consultant, but there is no rule. That it's not like that qualitative is the junior member of the firm that can't stand on its own. There is no problem with a study that doesn't have quantitative. If it's appropriate to the study, there's plenty of studies. There's plenty of consultancy work that all you ever will have is qualitative. That in itself does not disqualify. It's according to it goes back to our research questions. What are we trying to answer if we need this, whether we need it or not? It's set up in our methodology. But in a case like this, in this particular case, you're supposed to recognize, again, thinking about the sequence of when this case study was presented, this is a qualitative case study. There is no need, let me say that again, there is no need, there is no place for quantitative in this one. This is only about qualitative. And so to say that would be a drawback to this, or that could be argued by Jasmine or whoever, no. This is all you're going to have in this case. This is what you've got to work with. And so now she may make that argument, but then you have to be able to respond back to her. We don't need quantitative. This is about how your people feel. This is a qualitative study. Now, again, she may throw that up as in part of that defensive behavior that she's got, but you have to be able to answer to, there's no quantitative needed. This is all about your team and how they perceive you. This is a strictly qualitative consultancy piece for me to use. There is no appropriate quantitative. There's no need for quantitative here. You need to be able to hear the little T truth that these people are telling you. That's what you've got to be able to do as the consultant in this one. That's a red herring. That's a false narrative there, false equivalency. But now that doesn't mean that Jasmine won't say that to you. But you have to be able to respond to that argument in kind that, this is their truth. You got to hear it.
Well, like I said from the start, we came from a little different angle. We don't mean to imply that quantitative data doesn't matter. We do. I know the group understand that this is a qualitative case, so I do want to make sure that I put that out there. And certainly your comments
that it doesn't matter. Again, we have to be careful that we don't imply that it's second best.
Sure. Absolutely. So as we continue in the background, the interviews that were conducted, as you see in blue, team members believe access to Jasmine is too limited. Team members appreciates being included in decision making. Jasmine's use of humor and sarcasm is hurting the team, the members' feelings. Team requests for Jasmine to be more direct and forthcoming. So we'll move to the next slide. And again, like I said, I gave context that we kind of came from a little different angle. And I will mention, because I've been in an organization, I guess, for 28 years, feedback can go both ways. And so we were looking at it from the lens of the organizational consultant as well, not simply Jasmine's perspective. So when you look at number one about the consultant, how did Jasmine respond, accomplish, hope for, and how was the meeting started, and was it successful? We felt like using feedback data. Jasmine responded in the defensive mode. We know that data is available, but we felt like it defeated the purpose of the feedback to assess the leader. You know, in terms of, way the data that came out, as you mentioned, that's the data available, but we were looking for more because some of the feedback that came back, we don't know if, depending on her availability, could be the reason why she may not be available. We just don't know that. And so when we're looking at it from the lens of consultant, we think that, like the last case we had, that maybe, if we had a little bit more data, then we may have made a little different assessment. We felt like the meeting started off on the defense and wasn't successful because the purpose of the process was geared for the ultimate outcome, to help Jasmine grow as a leader. We felt like she reached out for this consultant. She reached out for help. And for us, we felt like that's someone that wants to improve. And so some of the feedback we felt like came across as a little personal. And again, this comes from the lens from looking at it as a consultant. Number two, Jasmine, how did it feel to hear feedback? She felt like it wasn't constructive. Do you feel heard what should have been presented? Not necessarily. Was looking at more constructive feedback of how I can improve, not a description of certain situations, which may not represent of how I function a vast majority of the time. And looking at the third question, the feedback, was it more descriptive or evaluative? We felt that the feedback, we believe, described more so than being a value, than evaluates with no explanation of why. The specific example that we reference is whenever I have an angry customer or need Jasmine to make a decision, it seems like I never get a response from her. And that's good in terms of the qualitative. But the question that we have from a consultant, that if I'm asking this person in this is this the full extent? Is her job changing? Is she just away more because she's got more duties? As a consultant, those are the kind of questions I'm gonna have before I take just that one particular side of it. I want to know more. C, was it balanced in terms of positive and negative feedback? It is our interpretation that there was more negative feedback than positive feedback. There was no balance. Does this help or punish? The feedback appears to punish rather than help improve. Again, Jasmine was called, asking, requesting for this information. But looking the experience I had with organizations, if you start out with this kind of information and feedback, she's going to shut down. And we felt like it shuts down the whole process of trying to help her improve. Although Blair get to that in a moment. The address behaviors Jasmine can control. Again, these come from discussion questions. The possible overuse of humor and sarcasm that she can control, and being more direct in decision making. We felt like those are things that she can control. Motivated action. We feel like, Dr. Lamb, you said this a few moments ago, Jasmine may not accept the feedback. Maybe not. It depends on how, as a consultant, how the process is set up. We felt since the feedback came across as more negative, instead of evaluating, it simply describes the behavior. Evaluating to us was a more comprehensive view, or over time, of why Jasmine may be responding as she does, while describing is more opinionated and critical of her actions in certain moments. And we've seen this in organizations, and I've even done it myself as a leader. I might make an observation about a leader, but it may not necessarily be true because I don't know the whole extent of what that leader has to go through. So as an organizational consultant, I need to understand both pictures. And in terms of lessons learned, Blair will address those possible solutions for Jasmine, alternatives and recommendations when we get to her. But this time I'll turn over to colleague Jamaica, who couldn't be here, but we did, Dr. Lamb, get him in a voice over for these slides.
Good.
Mhm. I think Blair's trying to cue it up.
Can you not hear it? Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
We can't hear the video.
Okay, I may have to stop my sharing and then start it again
Yeah, you
to
have
make
do
sure that the sound was sharing.
The central problem, according to our
You hear
group,
now?
from our observations looking at the case, is that the consultant did not do a very good job in their data collection and in how they're sharing the feedback, and also in how they're sharing the feedback out to the organization that they're working with. In the way that they have presented the information, it is very limited on what actually was said. Additionally, it appears that some of the feedback is very biased and it's not presented in a neutral way, but it seems to be more pushing and more from a perspective of this is what the consultant thinks is important rather than what the information is saying is important. Something that we found was missing or lacking was like not having a clear understanding of like how many people felt this way, how the numbers that relate to what the themes that emerge. So being able to see the themes, but also see like if there are 11 people in the organization and 5 of them felt away, and this is what the 5 people said, that I think that helps strengthen the argument and helps strengthen the theme's validity and like knowing that it is saying what it's supposed to be saying, and it can help the team leader really understand like what's going on rather than just some statements that are not really given in a way that tells us a full picture. In thinking about setting up the meeting to really go over the feedback that was given, this is the agenda that we came up with. We first found it important to ask Jasmine how does she feel about getting feedback from the team. Depending on how she answers that question would help us understand how we might need to broach the conversation, if we need to be prepared to explain ourselves further, or if she would be open and receptive to the conversation. We'd also think about discussing the methods used to collect the feedback, so that we want her to know, like, what did we do? What was our process? How did it happen? And then talk about the themes that emerged. If this was our information, we'll talk more specifically about what themes emerged, how many people shared those themes, or how many responses that align with each theme, and how we got to where we got. We'll give examples that supports them, the supports to themes, and then we'll also talk about and give space for if Jasmine has questions about like the data collection or the information that we're sharing in the meeting, giving her opportunity to like ask us questions and like seek further knowledge from this meeting. After that, we would end with engaging her in what next steps can be, thinking about what she wants to do with this information. If she wants us to help her think about recommendations, if she wants to move further with more information gathering, or what other actions might be necessary. We could brainstorm with Jasmine based off what we understand from the themes, from the information, from the meetings that we've had with the individuals, to help us really move forward, and help her and her organization in their processes.
So some of the lessons learned that we've observed from this case study, that there seems to have been no details of the consultant holding her own observations of the interactions between Jasmine and the team personally. We felt that this could have also added to possibly her anecdotal notes to go with the data that she has collected from the team members. As previously discussed, we do know that the comments from the team members is very important, and it gives great qualitative data. We thought that this could also add to what the data that she has collected if she held her own observational notes and was able to observe the interactions with her team members herself. Also with the identification of interviewees, as stated, there are 11 members, and we just wanted to go through, and we noticed that there was no discussion about the types of questions that were posed to the interviewees when we read over the effective interview strategies. That was a big focal point of how to hold and conduct a good interview, was the questions that you pose, and to make sure that they were free as much as possible of any bias or probing of that sort. So it would have been nice to have known exactly the types of questions that were being asked that led itself those that feedback. Also, we thought that the feedback could have been more balanced. Based on the meeting with Jasmine, you just saw the agenda, based on her response, because as of yet, again, we're still going on the assumption that she would be defensive. So based on her response regarding her feelings about receiving feedback, that would then allow us to, or the consultant to customize a feedback process to help her with her growth. The recommended solutions or best practices in this case that we would use to go forward with helping Jasmine develop her leadership skills would be to customize or revise that feedback practices that are currently going on. If it is in fact that she is takes criticism critically and or negatively, we would like to implement a 2-to-1 positive negative feedback system, whereas when we meet to discuss weekly goals or things that have happened, that she would receive for every negative piece of feedback, two positive pieces of feedback. It has been stated throughout the day that yes, Jasmine requested this consultant to come in and help her with her leadership development, but as stated, just because you ask for that help does not necessarily mean you're going to be receptive to what they're actually telling you to do and the work that is needed to actually make those changes. So it is with the intention that hopefully with the more positive feedback and showing her things that she is doing well, that this would promote motivation for her to do the work, to actually work towards making those positive changes, which we'll focus on with the next point. Also, we thought that it may be helpful if major feedback was not given immediately after major wins or setbacks. And we thought that this would help to allow self-reflection for Jasmine. Again, being that she does need development in her leadership, we thought that this would allow her some time to reflect on her leadership and how she has contributed to help lead in those current outcomes. And then with the focus on areas of control, we thought that this is the part where she would be doing the work to improve her leadership skills. As discussed with the qualitative data, many of the team members stated her time was very limited. We were not given her schedule or the parameters of her schedule. So we're not sure if that plays a part. If it does not, if it comes out that she just wants to be in her office, she does not want to be on the floor working with her customer service team and helping with customers, then that of course is a time management issue, and that needs to be addressed immediately. She does absolutely need to help her team members working with, as we stated, with customer service. That is what customer service is all about, getting to the root of the problems and helping your customers and helping working as a team. She also can work on becoming more self-aware. This would address the issue that a lot of the team members discussed as her sarcasm and hurting people's feelings. She needs to be more self-aware and limit her sarcasm. A strategy that we thought that could be implemented would be her possibly watching herself on video, interacting with her customers, maybe possibly at a staff meeting that they do have, and where she could actually watch back the video footage and observe her own body language and the comments that she frequently makes to her team. Hopefully, if she is does not take criticism well, hopefully with her actually seeing with her own eyes the things that she's doing and how it is affecting her teammates, hopefully this will allow her some reflection to be able to see, you know, how she is negatively affecting the team and her part that she's playing in it. Also, her decisiveness is something that she definitely has control over, improving. If, as one of the other groups called it, insecure leadership, if she is having difficulties making decisions because she does not know what to do, then that means she needs some ongoing development in her content knowledge of her role to be able to effectively make those decisions and properly lead her team. One of the positive feedbacks from her team was that she does collaborate with them, and they enjoyed that she collaborates with them and gets their input, but in which that also helps build the trust in the workplace. But at no time should her team feel that they are being held responsible for completing her job and making the decisions that she should be doing. That should definitely just be a team effort to work together collaboratively, but ultimately she holds the responsibility of making those tough calls and those decisions for the organization. And so that is our presentation.
All right, back up 2 slides. All right. Okay. Let's read the last bullet. More balanced feedback. All right, you can stop your share now. In 1976, the Alexander school system, which was a private boarding / reformatory that had dormitories. It was a residential campus in the very northern part of Rutherford County, going into McDowell County, out in the middle of Champion Timberlands. It closed in 1976. They moved all of those youthful offenders to the high school, the public high school in that district. These were not the best and brightest, but the problem was not really their intelligence, it was their behavior. These were kids who had committed felonies. This was a tough bunch. And so we had a lady there at the high school who I taught with there. She taught Bible. That's how old I am. We still taught Bible in high school, public high school. The churches paid her salary. Her name was Miss Ari Smith. And Miss Ari Smith tried to be balanced in everything that she did. And even with that group, if she couldn't say anything else about those boys, she would say, oh, he's got pretty eyes. She was always trying to find the best in everybody. And I respected that in her. And I've tried to remember that over the years. That's a good thing, is try to be fair and balanced, to try to find the good in everybody. But in a qualitative data sense, we have to be careful when we start trying to apply that standard. And one of the things that's highlighted in one of the chapters in Merriam is this this trying to make sense of the data or trying to balance the data. And that's when we start applying bias, as crazy as that sounds. That's where the bias kicks in. And we have to be careful that, that even though Jasmine hired us, we may not be able to find any balanced data. But that doesn't mean that what we have, that does not discount the efficacy of what we have. Because we can't find some positive doesn't mean that the negative is efficacy. That doesn't tell us the story if that's not real. We have to be careful as consultants and as leaders to make sure that we present a fair and balanced data summary. But we also have to, we can't make it up if it's not there. And we can't go to extraordinary lengths to try to find something if it's not really there. And we have this need as humans to make sense of our world. That, you know, we started out this course with our first case study on social constructivism, how we make sense of things, how we agree that everything ought to work. And if we're decent human beings, we want to find the good in everybody, like Ms. Smith did. But sometimes there's no good to be found. And we have to make sure that our bias doesn't kick in, and we try to present a fair and balanced, or what we consider to be fair, assessment. Sometimes it's just not there, and we have to be careful that we don't go to extraordinary lengths. Remember, you're a consultant. You're not this person's agent. You are not their PR firm. It's not your duty to make up and find good things about them if they don't exist. And that's where we get into interpretation of qualitative. And that's when people in my tribe, the quantitative people, that's when we roast the qualitative people. You're just making stuff up now. You know, this is not what the data says. You have to be real careful about that. You only find good if there's good to be found. If there's not, then you have to acknowledge that. And I'll give you an example now. This may, I'm going to give you two examples in recent modern history, political history. And this may offend some of you. And if it does, you know, you're grown, you'll get over it. In the aftermath of what went on in Charlottesville, in the riots there, the former president said, there's good people on both sides. I don't believe that. That people fighting for racism, that they're good people. I don't suspect that's the case. But again, he was trying to be fair and balanced because he wanted votes from both sides. But there's no good to be found in that, unfortunately. There's only the tragedy of the young lady that was killed. I actually went up there and stood at that spot. It's powerful. I don't travel that much anymore, but it was important for me to go. I wanted to see for myself. That's number one. And number two, in the last 2 weeks in Texas, teachers were told that they had to present opposing views to the Holocaust. There is no opposing view to the Holocaust. That is the single largest tragedy in modern history. There is no opposing view that there was good people on both sides, or that there was that was anything but just the absolute horrific thing that it was. There is no opposing view. Now we can see those, but we also, again, in our attempt to be fair and unbiased, sometimes we have to be careful to make sure we report things as they are. And we can't. We just. I appreciate the tack you took on this one. You're not wrong. You know, this is a good one. But just be careful. Be careful on two things. Number one, be careful that you in any way imply qualitative is not data, or that it's less than data. It's like junior data. And number two, it's not your job to find good if there isn't any there. That is not your job as a researcher. The The foremost qualitative researcher of our time is Malcolm Gladwell. We all like Malcolm. We enjoy his podcasts. We enjoy his videos, his TED Talks, everything about Malcolm. We love his books, all those things. And Malcolm just presents what he finds. That's what I appreciate about him. He just presents what he finds. And it's very illustrative for us all. He doesn't have a preconceived notion. He doesn't have a spin. He doesn't go with conventional wisdom. He just presents what's out there. And that, you know, he is as free from bias as anybody I've ever seen do qualitative work. And that's what I appreciate about him. That he doesn't attempt to make it make sense. He just tells you what he found. So
Can I ask a question?
sure.
So I know we all are I feel like we all heard of like the critical race theory and
Yep.
whether to teach it or not to teach it.
Yep.
All of that. So in thinking about it being no good or not look, or I guess the examples you gave, would, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do you, I guess people are researching behind whether to teach it or not. And let me see how to formulate this. How do you teach, or how as a researcher do they justify to not, teach it by saying, it was some good people on each side, if that makes sense, or if it doesn't, I can explain more. I guess I don't really know how to express what I'm trying to ask, but I hope you kind of get the idea.
I do. I heard a good explanation last night. Critical race theory, you don't teach until you get into college. That these high school AP kids, this is a college course. If you can't handle it, it's too early for you. Everybody doesn't need to be an AP. Just because your mama wants you in there. All kids are gifted. If you don't believe it, just ask for mamas. But every kid doesn't need to be an AP. That's number one. But critical race theory, the notion that they were good people. No, they weren't. They weren't good people. If they held slaves, they weren't good people. That was never a good thing. Even in their time, it wasn't a good thing. This notion of, well, it was accepted back, so we can't help you. That's one of those things, like murdering people in the Holocaust, that was never acceptable. No, there weren't good people on both sides of that argument either. And we have to understand that we're not applying an unreasonable standard of today's standards to people 200 years ago or 300 years ago. Even by standards 300 years ago, that was indefensible. That's why we had a civil war in this country. It was indefensible. That a lot of people wanted to do it, that still doesn't make it right. Again, the opinion of 1,000 idiots is still the opinion of an idiot. Numbers don't matter. Goes back to ethical leadership, moral leadership. That's what I'm talking about. You can't overcome ethical shortcomings. Can't outrun those. And this notion that we want both sides presented, there is no two sides to this. Slavery was wrong. And if you held slaves or perpetuated that system, even in that day, in that time, that was wrong. That can't ever be right. You can't ever get a pass for slavery. You can't ever get a pass for killing Jews. Can't ever get a pass on those. That we, for political expediency, because we want votes of stupid people, does not excuse that bad behavior. And that when we talk about critical race theory, that is an adult concept. It's not something for kids. You need to be in college when you get to that in order to be able to understand the multifacets. Critical race theory is mentioned in Merriam. It's one of the outline pieces in the chapters that I've got for us today. That yes, but that's more a graduate school concept than it is even undergraduate. That understanding the underlying social constructs. Again, it goes back to social constructivism. Until you can understand that, you can't make sense of critical race theory. You have to, that's the first piece of understanding critical race theory. You have to understand social constructivism, how we make sense of the world, how we put it together, what is acceptable and what is not, what we all agree upon. And that's what I mean, this notion of let's make America great again, that's that, I want to go back prior to the Civil Rights Act. I want to go back to the 1950s. That's a going back to a time where, you know, that's just code for white supremacy. That's all that is. Now, and so I pulled an article this morning. There should be a CRT for all ages. That is true. But in a current context of what we're in, we're not interested in developing that kind of curricula for kids. We ought to, but we're not interested in that. So in its current version, it's not really appropriate for kids prior to post-secondary education. I pulled an article this morning, kind of goes along with the theme of today. Let me see if I've still got it up. That kind of encapsulates this was reported this morning. A hospital down in Texas, is always Texas, went through the process of hiring this fella, and then right before he was to assume that they rescinded the offer after he'd already traveled to Houston, vehicle, you know, finding a place to live, the whole deal. And then, you know, a couple of days before he was actually due to show up at work, they rescinded his job offer. And what, now remember, they hired him to, his job was going to be vice president, chief equity officer of this health system in Houston. And his crime was, again, that's what they hired him for. And so he gave them feedback. What his crime was is when he came to town and rented a vehicle and had a realtor take him around, he gave feedback to the hospital system, said, this guy is racist. Microaggressions, he did this, he did that, he did the other. He questioned why I would be driving this nice SUV. All these things, he took me by places, you know, this is where black folks would buy their clothes. I mean, was really, was really bad. And he reported that back to the system. And when they got that, oh, he's not a good fit. So they hired him to do this job. And when he started to do this job, before he even got there, they rescinded the job offer again. Just because they hire you doesn't mean they want to hear what you have to say. It's a perfect example. Perfect example of what we've been talking about this morning in giving feedback. Just because somebody hires you to give them this feedback and this data doesn't mean that they want to hear it. Just, they will, you know, again, the argument will be, well, it's not real data. You know, they will start to dissemble all these, you know, all these excuses as to why your data is not real. It's not accurate. It's not big T truth because it's not a number. It's not measurable. All these things, what they want is that they want that bias. They want you to present both sides. Yeah, you're bad, but you've done some good things too. But what if you haven't done some good things too? What they really want you to do in many cases is validate them. That's what an agent does. That's what a PR firm does. That's not what a consultant does. That's the difference. That's not what leaders do. That's what managers do. So whether you're looking at this from the role of the consultant or the role of the leader, in either case, people aren't going to want to hear the truth if it's not what they consider to be fair and balanced, so that they end up looking good. But what if they don't look good? There is no good look on slavery or killing Jewish people. There's no good look there, folks. There is no alternative side to the coin. You know, and if that's your goal, is to always to be fair and balanced, then you can't be a leader and you can't do this job as a consultant either, if you can't tell people the truth. Now, again, they don't want to hear it. Again, I've told you from the very beginning, you know, the role here is to be a missionary. Remember, that's different than being an evangelist. They're looking for evangelists that take the word that people want to hear it, you know, the positive word. Why do you think in the realm of organized religion that the prosperity gospel is flourishing in traditional terms as aren't? Prosperity gospel, everything's good. God loves you just like you are. Don't have to change. You can be that same scumbag all week as long as you show up and send your money in on Sunday to us. You know, all is good. No, your religion's got to be about how you live your life and treat others. But people don't want to hear that, and so they gravitate to the good news. And just because people hire you to be the leader, to take a position, because they hire you as a consultant, doesn't mean that they want to hear the truth. They want you to confirm them. And that's one of those things that you again, that's why you hand it to them and you run to the bank. How many times have I told you this? And try to cash the check before it bounces. I am not training you to be marketing agents or agents, that's not the point here. That's in a different school. That's over in the School of Business, where they teach you marketing for your clients. You're trying to present big T and little t truth to your clients here. Whether they like it or not doesn't change the truth. And see, that's one of the things that that's kind of the battle for the soul of America right now, is if I don't want to hear it, it's not true. It's fake news. No, just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's fake. But it's all now about if I don't like it, or if I don't accept it, or if it doesn't facilitate me and what I do, then it's not real. Well, yeah, sure it is real. And so as researchers, as empirical researchers, as ethical researchers, we have to make sure that we report what we find and we act upon what we find, not what we wanted, not what the group wanted us to find, or what they aspire to be, or what their marketing data or PR data says they are. Our job is to tell them what's real. Now, it's up to them to act upon that. That's why I've told you, don't get into the implementation. It's up to them. If they want to hire you to do that, that's a different gig. That's a different gig. I've got one right now. She's finishing next month. And she did her consultancy with a Smart Start program up in northeastern North Carolina. And they have fought her all the way on data. Because they don't want, it known how ineffective they really are, because they take federal money. But now she's come up with a plan, and now they want her to implement the plan. They agreed to her price, and I said I wouldn't do it, but she said, yeah, I want to do it. Now they want her to do it for free. Even though they agreed to her contracted price of $150 an hour. Now they think that we want you to do it for free. And I have advised against that as well, and we'll see what she does. But they are the poster child for not wanting to hear it. Here's the plan. Well, we don't want to be the one to have to implement this, because we don't want the bad feelings to come back on us. We want somebody else to take the bad feelings as well. But we don't want to pay you, because we're being paid to do it. And because we're being paid, we don't want to pay you. And so it's just a case study in itself of the problems with consultancy. Of people that don't want to hear it. And then when they've been tasked to improve by the federal government, who's going to cut their grant funds off, they don't really want to. And so we can't get into motivation as to why people called us as consultants. Our job is to go find what we find and tell them what we found, and here's a plan to fix it. That's what you were supposed to learn in the first 4 semesters, is all these different things that you could do, to try to fix some of these problems. You write the plan and you hand it to them. Now, if you're the leader, you're charged with putting the plan in place. That's a different gig if you're the leader. But you've got to understand the roles here, the juxtaposition of the roles. Okay, I've got about 10 more minutes and we're going to quit today. So let me share my screen right quick. So what I have done for you, now they don't have the highlighting on them. You're supposed to be smart enough to figure out what the highlighting is. But what I have done,
Dr. Lamb, can we get that article?
yeah, I'll send you the article.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I've done is I've highlighted or outlined each of the chapters in Merriam for you. And again, these are things that I've talked about today. Again, I don't have them highlighted for you. You're supposed to be able to do this. These are my notes. But again, qualitative and quantitative, got to remember that. It's not the same standard. It's the preponderance of evidence. It's little t truth. It's not big T truth. And we can't discount it simply because it's not big T truth. It's not a number. And back to Tim's point here, critical research, feminist theory, critical race, so on, focus on power, who has it, how it's negotiated, what structures in society reinforce current distribution of power. When you're doing this kind of work, again, it's back to social constructivism, how the world works. You know, if you get into that, it's not going to go well for you, not in modern times. And so we focus on the process, meaning and understanding. Make sure you understand that. Good practice is a questioning stance, high tolerance for ambiguity. Again, it doesn't have to make sense. Be a careful observer, ask good questions, think inductively. Seeing the themes that emerge. Don't go in with preconceived notions. I hate it when it does this. Basic qualitative research. How people interpret their experiences. It's real to them. This feedback that Jasmine's group gave, it was real to them. We can't discount it just simply because it's their experience or it's their opinion. How they interpret those experiences, how can they construct their worlds, and what meaning they give. Again, it's real if it's real to them. And too many times, and then we've got the different types of qualitative research, phenomenology, ethnography, grounded theory, and narrative inquiry. These, if we were going to do these on their own, and you can read about each of those. The one that I would say is the most misinterpreted, and I have this in Deol's top 10 ways to cheat with data, and it's also in my top 10 on qualitative. Simply observing something does not make it a phenomenon. Something has to happen for it to be a phenomenon. For example, many years ago, in a land far, far away, when I was a young school administrator, when I was in my certificate program, one of the things that they did to train us was take us out to schools to simply observe. That's not a phenomenon. Now, if they did something that a school administrator did that, like maybe if we went and watched them do a due process or a IEP meeting or something like that, that's a phenomenon. That is a qualitative experience. But simply standing around in a building for 2 hours is not a qualitative experience. That is not a phenomenon. And so in our clinical experiences that we design, we have them go specifically, go sit in on an IEP meeting, you know, go watch a duplex. These are phenomenon that we're trying to teach you something out of. I use that as an example. But one of the things the mistake that we make, the biggest mistake in qualitative, is if we think we just go and observe that makes it a phenomenon. If nothing happens during that time, then it's not a phenomenon. It's not data collection. Got to be careful with that. Mixed methodology. Really, there are three types that we do in action research. Convergent, explanatory, exploratory, we rarely do. And the reason why, qualitative, and then a survey, employs method research, when there is little known about a particular population. We're trying to find out. Usually it's this one, qualitative comes first and then the collection follows, explaining the results of what we found from the qualitative kind of thing. This is rare in action research. This is very rare because we know who the population is. This is mostly done in theoretical. And this explains action research and the principles behind it. This is what you're doing. There is a problem. So if you don't know what action research is from a qualitative perspective, you need to read this. Remember, we're doing action research. And our qualitative informs, the best is the convergent design, but we can also do the explanatory sequential design here. But this one is, if you read through this, you'll understand, we're not doing theoretical work. Doesn't really fit most of the cases that we would be doing. So that's the thing to remember from that. Moving quickly here, I'm keeping an eye on our time. We start with a research problem, a theoretical framework, reviewing the literature, sample. Again, this is constant in our business. We select a topic. What's the problem? What are we trying to fix? Our theoretical framework, we got to do our lit review. That's the way it always starts. Never any different. Always works this way. And that then goes into here, our methodology, sample selection. We talked sample and population. And how many, we talked about that it always goes this way. This is chapter 4. This is the scientific method. It always goes this way. There is no deviation from this. Whether it's a dissertation practice, consultancy, or capstone, does not matter. It always goes this way. Conducting effective interviews, we've talked about this, structured or unstructured focus groups. We've talked about asking good questions. We had a really good presentation this morning on this one. Things to remember about these. My suggestion always is to record them so that you can pay attention and not just have your head down taking notes. I think that's really bad practice. Go back and watch the video and take your notes. I know it's an extra step. Don't shortcut it though. Qualitative is important. Don't shortcut it. All right. What to observe, make sure that you understand that there's more than just watching the person. That's the good thing. That's the part to remember on this one. If you didn't read the book, you know, spend an hour with these lesson plans. You can read through all of them in less than an hour. So, just be a careful observer. There's more data than just the questions you ask. The thing to remember here on using documents and artifacts is know the source of them for their validity and reliability. Public record, you know, you don't have any issues with releasing that. Personal documents, you know, that's where IRB kicks in on documents and artifacts. If they're personal things, then you shouldn't release them or make them identifiable. But again, relevant materials and authenticity. Now, you got to know that. Again, Google's not a good source. Google Scholar is, Bulldog One is an generic search, but the stuff you find on the internet doesn't mean it's real. Surprise, surprise, stuff's on the internet that's real. Again, you know, what we try to do, here's a good kind of how to do these. If you were doing simply a qualitative study on its own, this is how you would go about each of these. Action research is most relevant to us. We're trying to make something happen. But how it happens, ongoing cycle of plan, act, observe, reflect, again, continuous improvement. Again, this is what we do in action research. We're trying to solve a problem. That's what we need to remember. We start with a problem statement. And then we go back to the old validity, reliability, and ethical behavior. Ethics, again, comes right back in. And triangulation, as I call it, or triangulation. You know, we're comparing qualitative and quantitative in convergent design to make sure that we're consistent. That what we find is actually from little t and big T are the same. That's what we're looking for, because we want to be able to generalize or transfer the findings from our study, the smaller sample, to the larger population. We're always trying to do that, always. Okay, so as we go down through whatever newsfeed that we have, we have to, more than anything else, we have to look for, even in our personal news feed, we have to, no matter what the headline says, we have to look at where it came from. All right, this came from People magazine. You know, they have an agenda there. People magazine is, and so they've run this story on this Florida mom says she's been banned because she has a fans only site. You know, this is an ad. This is just, that means this is a lie, whatever it is. When it says ad right here, that means it's not true. Sports, Panthers Wire. You know, this means that these people have an agenda. They're trying to sell you a product. They're trying to get you to go along with whatever they decide to do. Housekeeping, Forbes, Business Insider. Okay, now this one will be a story that's not really a story. It will be something kind of like Hillary's emails that are just completely irrelevant, but they're trying to make a thing out of it because it's Fox News. North Carolina Middle School art assignment infuriates parents over sexual imagery. Again, there might be one parent that's mad about that, but see, they're going to make a big thing over it, and it's probably and they've got the story completely wrong, or they've accentuated things that don't matter and hid the real story behind, because that's what they do. That's their agenda. You know that when you do them. Add, I'm trying to find one here. Huffington Post, that'll be the liberal perspective. And they'll point out the, you know, the snowflakes in Republic. They'll do that. Let's see, find the one that's always, I'm looking for the National Examiner. That's the crazies. When you get one of them, it's just completely over the top, crazy, QAnon stuff. They're trying to pass off as real news. Let's see if they've got one on the front page here. They're usually right here on the front. Here's a Fox. This will be something about some conservative issue that's not a real issue that they're trying to make it be one. Yeah, Loudon superintendent compared parents' protest to January 6th. Again, you know, they'll take whatever they can out of context and may just completely make it up. But that's what they do on that site. Osmo, Patriots Wire. I mean, these are not unbiased, not regulated or refereed sites. They all have their own agenda. And you can tell what their agenda will be. This will be one that, you know, I see the governor of Florida. This is Huffington Post. This will be not flattering for him. And so they've called his take, called him fraud, and what his is spin. Now it may be, you know, according to your politics, but you understand that, and you read the Fox News, that'll be something, you know, on in the libs. That's what they do. That'll be the slant on that story, regardless of what happened. I'm disappointed I don't see a Washington Examiner story this morning. I'm taking up our time here. Fox News. This is a non-story that they're making a story. That's what they always do. They take some little insignificant piece and try to make you think that that's the real story behind it. That's their deal. And I was hoping to find one of the QAnon stories this morning that's under National Examiner. National Examiner is not a real news organization. It's just a what do we call it? It's a propaganda site for John. It's not a real paper or a real media. They portray themselves as being media. They are not. It's not an actual media site. Hurry up, state. There's another Fox News story. Again, it won't be what the real story was. They'll take some part of an interview and make that try to be the actual story. That's what they always do. Fox News, you know, but as you can see, whatever news feed that you have, simply because it's Yahoo or Google or whatever feed that you have to look at the byline of the story. And again, the Washington Examiner, this is the first time I've seen in months that there's not a story from them. That's not a real news outlet. It's a QAnon deal. That they portray themselves as media. It's not really media. It's like One American Network, OAN. It's not really a network. It's just a propaganda machine for QAnon. So you have to be, you know, part of our charge is the veracity, the validity of documents. And when we talk about documents, that's what I've been showing this morning. that's where most of our documents come from, is news feeds. But we can't just say because Yahoo had it on or Google had it on or whatever. We have to look more specifically at who is the author and what, and we have to look at the body of their work. Do we pick themes out in their work? Can we see, do they have bias? And is the slant always toward that bias? And that's the thing that when we're doing documents and artifacts, 99% of that will come from news feeds, that kind of stuff. But we can't just say this source, Yahoo, is reliable, or Google is reliable, or MSN. I read all three. That they're all reliable. No, dig down a little bit deeper. Who is this group that is putting this information out? If I read 5 of their pieces, will I see the same constant theme in all 5 of them? That's what we're talking about, to do your due diligence on validity, reliability of when you're doing, again, qualitative is interviews, observations, and documents. And that's the important piece on documents, is making sure that it's from a reliable source that's refereed, that is independent and neutral in its findings. Again, Bulldog One, Eric searches, those kinds of things, but most people don't use those anymore. Most people use more current kind of media, but that doesn't mean it's better. You have to be careful in that. All right, our time is up for today. Next week, we will move into program evaluation with Royce, where we put all this together and evaluate programs with the knowledge that we have, because that's what leaders have to do. Leaders have to evaluate programs. And so that's kind of we've graduated to that point now. And we'll talk about our outside reading books on super crunching, good, bad, and different. Is it just a tool, or is it for good or for evil? Can it be both? We'll talk about quants, digging into quantitative data in terms of the political ramifications of that. We'll talk about that next week. And then on December 4th, again, I've given you the format. You write your paper, you add your quantitative and qualitative down in that. Again, this shouldn't be War and Peace. Doesn't have to be 100 pages. The whole document should be 6 to 10 pages, and then you've got your slideshow with the big ideas. Again, your limit is absolutely 20 slides. I'd prefer 10. And don't try to cram everything on every slide. Big ideas here, folks. So I'm giving you the 5-week warning. You got 5 weeks for that, but you got to write your proposal. It's in written narrative form with those 2 pieces in it. And then you do a slideshow, the big ideas. You'll present on December 4th. We'll have 30 minutes. And we may have some guests. Anything else for the good of the group? Candace didn't join us today. Has anybody heard from Candace?
She joined us for about the first hour, but then she had a personal commitment.
Oh yeah, that's right. You told me. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I wrote that down somewhere. All right, we got it. All right, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good Halloween. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Hey,
Have a good
Dr.
day.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Just for you. I looked at our schedule on my computer, and it looks like, I thought we were having law next semester, but it looks like we're having innovation and transformation. Do you know, would our schedule be right on there, or could that not be right?
Dr. Hamilton is out. What course number have you got for next semester?
It says 752, but 750 is the law class, but it says 752 on my schedule. And
Y'all
it says
y'all hadn't had law, right?
no.
I don't know which one of those you're going to have. See, when you start off cycle, we can't have 738 in the summer. And so that's the problem. So I don't know what y'all are going to have next semester, quite honestly. I'll have to ask Dr. Hamilton. I'll shoot him an email right now and have him get back to you on which classes y'all are gonna have. So y'all started, when was your first semester? Let me write this down.
We started in the spring of 2020.
What I
So this
thought.
is semester 6 for us.
And so y'all are, that's again, y'all are off cycle. And so not only off cycle for spring, but then it throws you off cycle even more because of 738 having to be put back a semester.
So we have 50, 52, and 54 left. Those would be our last 3 classes.
50, 52, and 54.
And it says Martin is teaching that.
Conrad, yeah. And so that's what you have. Now, where are you reading that from?
I'm on the Gardner website where you can look at your student schedule.
Okay. All right, so y'all got 750, 52, and 54. And right now it says that y'all are gonna have which one?
752.
Says 752. Okay. But you lack 50, 52, and 54. All right, I'll shoot him an email. He's out of town this weekend, but he'll get back to me when he gets back. I don't know if he has access. He's up in Mount Airy. I don't know if they've got internet up there or not. They still carry water in a jug up there, so I'm not sure they have internet. So
I appreciate it.
all right, I'll get back to you.
Thank
All right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.